Golden Growler went sniffing around the ground. It seemed to be tracking Blood Dog's scent, and after a while, it began running forward. Broken stone buildings were everywhere, and their presence there made Han Sen frown. Golden Growler kept moving, and after 100 miles, there was a large number of stone tablets scattered across a clearing. The stone tablets weren't tidily placed, and many of them were even upside down. But they were the only objects in that place that featured text. Han Sen made Golden Growler slow down. Due to the fact that Golden Growler had to follow a scent to stay on track, he reeled him in a little. If he continued, it'd be hard to find Blood Dog. Han Sen observed the tablets that featured ancient text, the sorts of languages Han Sen had learned long ago. Some parts of the tablets were missing, but many were still readable. Emir defeated. Han Sen thought that was strange. There was only the name of someone and the word defeated. The tablet didn't look like a gravestone, but it didn't look like a memorial plaque either. Han Sen found it odd. He didn't know who the supposed Emir character was. Han Sen checked out a few of the other tablets that were nearby. One of them said, Velis defeated. Aside from the change in name, all the others were the same as well. Han Sen frowned and continued checking out the other tablets. They all seemed to contain a name, and the word defeated after. G defeated, Gautama defeated, Merrily defeated, Ginger defeated, Brahma defeated, Zeus defeated. All of those names were on the tattered tablets, but there was nothing distinguishing about them. They did give him a cold feeling, though, and it made him feel as if he had stepped back in time. It felt like a certain sadness permeated the atmosphere of that place. Han Sen did not know who or what those names belonged to, and he did not know how those folks might have been defeated. Aside from their names, nothing else was left behind. After going through all the tablets, there was a bronze palace. It wasn't as broken as the rest of the place, but it was still worn around the edges. There were the scrapes of a battle all across it, but it hadn't been hewn or broken. The palace seemed to be in good condition, all things considered. It was in the middle of the plain, but one half seemed to have sunken into the earth. One wall was stuck in the soil. Golden Growler followed the scent, which led them straight to the bronze palace. He gave a quiet rumble to Han Sen, as if to indicate Blood Dog was inside. Han Sen checked the exterior of the bronze palace first. There was a big title above the door which said, Hero Spirit Hall. For some reason, I have a bad feeling about this, Dragon Lady said, observing the palace ahead.
Han Sen nodded.
He felt rather unsafe, as well. The Dongxian aura had difficulty scanning inside the palace, so he was unable to determine whether or not Blood Dog was on the inside. The creature you summoned, where did it come from? Han Sen asked Dragon Lady. Dragon Lady gave a wry smile. I don't know. My ingredients are random. I never know exactly what I will summon, and I don't know where they come from. After that, Dragon Lady looked towards the Hero Spirit Hall. I think something is amiss. This place is too weird. It'd be best if we just left. We can try again another time. Han Sen wished to say something, but before he spoke, he heard a sound. The tightly shut door suddenly started opening up. Han Sen and Dragon Lady stared at the gap of the opening gate. Golden Growler growled at the sight ahead.
Top.
One hand suddenly appeared, pushing the door open. Han Sen looked at the hand that was holding the bronze door and noticed that it was rather skeletal in its appearance. Although it had kept the shape of a hand, the skin was thin and dried up against the bone. It was like birch bark, and it looked creepy. It looked dead. The hand grabbed the bronze door and slowly opened it. As the door opened toward them, Han Sen saw beyond it. He couldn't see much, but a massive support pillar was visible, holding up the roof. The bronze door opened halfway, and when it did, Han Sen could see the master of the hand. It was a being that was garbed with a black cloak. Aside from the hand, Han Sen couldn't discern anything more about its body. The entire being was wrapped up by that same cloak. All Han Sen could truly notice was the rough outline of its body, which looked rather human. Han Sen used his Dongxian aura again, but he was unable to feel anything. The man in the black cloak looked dead. It was as if he had no life force. Since you are here, come on in. The cloaked man opened the bronze gate fully now, and he stood at the entrance as he spoke. He looked toward Han Sen and the others before making a clanging, metallic sound. It was quite spooky. "What is your name?" Han Sen asked the cloaked man, very alert. "I am already dead, so what would be the purpose of having a name? If you require one, refer to me as the guardian spirit." The creepiness of the cloaked man's voice would strike so much fear into a person, their teeth would chatter. He lowered his head as he spoke, too. His face was fully concealed by the hood, like a spirit haunting a graveyard. "Guardian spirit, who are you protecting?" When Han Sen heard the name, he didn't feel any better. He wasn't quite willing to step forward either. "I am not guarding anyone now," Guardian Spirit said coldly. Han Sen frowned and gave the man another look. Then, he pointed to the tablets and asked, "Are you guarding them?" Guardian Spirit suddenly laughed quite strangely and said, "Yes and no. I guard them, but I don't guard them." "What does that mean?" Han Sen asked with a frown. "You'll know if you come and see." Guardian Spirit was still laughing quite strangely. "Whatever you're guarding, I can't say I'm interested," Han Sen said, and then patted his golden growler as an indication it was time to leave. It turned around and started to. The place was weird. Han Sen thought he was invincible in the fourth god's sanctuary, but there were still many strange and creepy things occupying that realm. And so, Han Sen did not think he could kill everything. After he saw Stay Up Late, he knew he was not as immortal as he fancied himself. "Even though you are here, you do not want to take a look?" Guardian Spirit asked quietly. Han Sen ignored him and hurried Golden Growler away. But he walked so slow now, like some phantom force of power was them back. Golden Growler began to slide backward. He slid all the way back until they were pulled right inside the Bronze Palace. Han Sen summoned his overbearing shield and Split Blade, then transformed into Fallen Slaughter. Split Blade was sent thrusting at Guardian Spirit. Split Blade went right into Guardian Spirit's body, but his body was actually like a genuine spirit's. The body faded away with the attack of that blade. Immediately, Han Sen looked around. He was surprised at what he saw next. On the walls of the palace, there were many sets of crystal armor. The armors were all tarnished with damage. It made them seem as if they had all experienced a great deal of fighting. Upon those crystal sets of armor, Han Sen could suddenly feel his battle mode begin to burn. It was like the crystal armor still possessed the urge to fight, and it began to burn him. That hall felt like the site of a great battle. Han Sen, standing in the hall, felt as if he was surrounded by an army of foes. And he felt that the master of the army had been slaughtered in battle. What surprised Han Sen the most was that the armors looked like the one he had procured off Tina. They might have possessed different powers, but they sure looked similar. Are they all Geno armors? Han Sen was in shock. Guardian Spirit's body appeared again, directly in front of a blue set of armor. He was wreathed in lightning. He looked at the armor and said, "This is Zeus armor." He was out there for 15 days before he fell. After that, Guardian Spirit walked towards a red set of armor. And he said, "This is Ginger's armor." He was out there for 19 days before he died. Guardian Spirit walked to each set of armor that could be seen, and told them who the armor belonged to. They were all the names of the tablets Han Sen had seen earlier. Guardian Spirit told Han Sen that they were indeed Geno armors, and it came as quite the surprise to him. After introducing the last armor, Guardian Spirit looked at Han Sen and laughed. They were heroes as much as they were failures. They weren't able to get out. They were humiliated and made to live here. What do you mean they were unable to get out? Han Sen asked Guardian Spirit. Get out of the sanctuary, of course. Guardian Spirit said coldly. He turned to look back at the armor and went on to say, their master died, but their armor still resides here. If you gain their approval, you may make use of them. They may have failed, but they did not want to lose. And they'd want nothing more than to fight again. You are giving them to us? Han Sen looked at Guardian Spirit in shock. He thought he'd have to conduct a big fight, but it didn't seem as if there would be. It sounded as if he was going to be given the armor for nothing. If you can take them with you, they're yours. Having them here is useless, anyway. Guardian Spirit's voice made people's teeth chatter. Thanks a lot, then. Han Sen did not feel guilty, so he waltzed up to the nearest set of armor and tried to lift it. Most people did not know about the power of Geno armors, but Han Sen did. The bronze palace was like a trove of treasure for Han Sen, and it was worth more than anything the Alliance could provide him. Han Sen picked up the red armor that once belonged to Ginger. There were 70 punctures and scrapes across it, and they all appeared to have been dealt by a sword. There were some piercings and dints across it too. Pang! Han Sen, after gripping the armor and trying to lift it, was blasted away after it suddenly started glowing red. Han Sen felt a strong power crash into him, one he was unable to block. It was like he had been hit by a train, and he went barreling back into the stone. His ears rang, and he was left seeing stars. "Are you okay?" Dragon Lady ran over to Han Sen and picked him up. "I'm fine," Han Sen said. He shook his head to clear his vision. Trying to maintain conscious after that vicious blast, he directed his attention back to Guardian Spirit. "It's fine if you don't want to give them to me, but why do that?" Guardian Spirit laughed. "They have a will of their own. I can't orchestrate their feelings. I told you that you'll need their approval if you were to take them." Han Sen frowned and stared at Guardian Spirit. He did not believe what he was being told. After he took Tina's Geno armor, none of this happened. He was able to just take it. "Believe it or not, but I am who you see. I am Guardian Spirit. Lying to you would not gain me anything," Guardian Spirit said. "I don't believe you." Han Sen gritted his teeth and tried taking another set of armor. The set of armor reacted the same way, and it blasted Han Sen away. The battle mood it possessed burned, and it clearly didn't want to be touched by Han Sen. But Han Sen wasn't going to give up so easily. He tried taking every single one. There were many of them, too. He was sure one of them had to suit him. But reality never aligned with Han Sen's ideals. After trying each and every armor, none were willing to accept him. His body had ended up all swollen, all for the gain of naught. As Han Sen's heart began to sink, Golden Growler walked forward and touched one of the armors. The armor was rather gold, but it was caked in green rust. Han Sen had tried grabbing it before, but it had blasted him away with gold light. Golden Growler's claws were grabbing the Geno core armor now. Han Sen thought Golden Growler would end up getting blasted away, but he didn't. The Geno armor was actually crushed beneath the might of his paws, like a simple golden snowflake. It blended into the skin of his body. Roar! When the entirety of that snowflake was absorbed by Golden Growler, he roared to the sky. The gold light appeared, and it manifested as a set of armor that would protect him. And then, Golden Growler did indeed look like a lion clad in armor. "That's not real, is it? It's weaker than little gold?" Han Sen's eyes were open wide in astonishment, unable to believe what Golden Growler had managed to do. He couldn't believe it. He himself had tried so hard to procure the armors, but he had failed every time. Golden Growler randomly touched one, and it submitted to his ownership. That wasn't very fair. Guardian Spirit looked at Golden Growler in shock, and it was obvious he was thinking about something. "Dragon Lady, you try as well," Han Sen said to her. He didn't have much hope she'd be successful, but he did hope he'd be able to take a few of the armors back with him. As he spoke, he also summoned Little Angel. If Golden Growler had been able to catalyze that reaction with the armor, there was a chance Little Angel could do the same. "Golden, try to fetch the others," Han Sen asked Golden Growler, feeling greedy. Golden Growler, though, was unable to gain the approval of the others. Perhaps he was only able to forge a connection with the golden armor, or perhaps it was only possible for him to take one away with him. Before Little Angel moved to claim an armor, though, a Geno armor came to her. It went flying off the wall, carried by a holy light. The holy light was immediately absorbed by Little Angel's body. "That's not fair. How does that happen?" Han Sen looked at Little Angel's holy light. It had become entwined with the Geno armor she was now wearing. With the increased volume of holy light all around her, she looked even more angelic. Dragon Lady was just as unfortunate as Han Senator. She tried many of the Geno armors, but failed each and every time. But just as it looked as if she was going to fail as many times as he had, Dragon Lady touched one armor in specific. It burst into flames and blended into her body.
D astérisque MN.
"This sucks. Why can't I have them? This is impossible." Han Sen wanted to try touching the Geno armor again. The results were the same, though. No matter how hard Han Sen tried, he could not get the approval necessary to take the armor. Guardian Spirit looked at Golden Growler, Little Angel, and Dragon Lady, and spoke. Roar's Geno armor, Marilee's armor, and Amir's armor. Not bad.
Han Sen just looked depressed.
He comforted himself by saying, these armors must have belonged to the losers of the crew. That's okay. I wouldn't want them anyway. Go. This is a hopeless place. Do not come back. Guardian Spirit began speaking again with his creepy voice. Are you a crystallizer? Han Sen asked Guardian Spirit. I am dead. It does not matter who I was. After he said that, the gates of the hero's spirit hall suddenly opened. Then, a strong force of suction pulled them all the way out of there. Crash! Han Sen and the others were dropped to the ground. When they stood back up, they were on the plane they had reached before smashing through the wall that led to the hidden place. Han Sen stood up and touched the wall again. It was a cold rock and nothing more. They could no longer get back. Han Sen flew up and over the mountain. He realized with shock that the mountain was situated right atop the plain. There was only grass beyond it, and there were no ruins, tablets, or a hero's spirit hall. If it wasn't for Golden Growler still wearing his Geno armor, Han Sen would have believed that entire sequence to be some bizarre dream. They were now unable to locate Blood Dog and the ruins, which meant leveling up Dragon Lady had been a failed venture. Fortunately, she'd get another chance in the near future, and there was no need to rush it too much. And the fact she had obtained a Geno armor made up for that. It may have been a little weary-looking, but it was a great find all the same. But after leaving the ruins, the glow of the Geno armors vanished. It seemed as if they had lost their powers. They couldn't be summoned in the general areas of the fourth god's sanctuary. Han Sen tried to clear his mind and think about these matters seriously. That ruin must not have originated in the fourth god's sanctuary, and Han Sen believed it must have belonged to the fifth sanctuary that existed in the Alliance's universe. Something must have occurred in the Alliance's universe, in which many things were destroyed. Similar to whatever had made a mess of Stay Up Late's control room. The same fate must have befallen the stone tablets and Hero's Spirit Hall. They must have been scattered across the sanctuaries. The Valley of Time might very well have been one of those places, too. What happened there? Han Sen did not have much information to go off of, though, so an absolute solution was not obtainable. Back in the shelter, Han Sen now wished to return to the Alliance. But he overheard Cheap Sheep and Green Cow in the midst of a discussion. I really want to take a look. It must be scary and exciting at the same time. The sheepish character sounded rather hyped. Brother Sheep, where did Death Goddess come from? She killed one of the 10 Son of Gods, Illusion Emperor. If she had joined Divinity's bout, perhaps she could have fought against Dollar. Green Cow mood. She couldn't fight against Dollar, win, and obtain first place. Second place, sure. But I really can't believe she managed to kill Illusion Emperor with just one arrow. Her power must have been greater than Armored Man's, Sheep said. It does not matter how strong she is alone. Her killing Illusion Emperor prompted the folk of Illusion to rally all sorts of elites to unify and kill her. I have heard they hired 2 super elite alphas, Green Cow said. Cheap Sheep nodded. Illusion knows a lot of people. Their alpha is begging other alphas for help, and they will get it. But even if they didn't get the assistance of the other alphas, they'd be sent some sort of help. And I actually heard Illusion Elder found a way to kill her. If she doesn't relent, she is going to die. If she knew to relent, she wouldn't have been so bold as to tackle Illusion the way she did. She provoked the Emperor and killed him. She is strong to be able to kill him, but the Alpha did not come out to fight her. And now, after all this time, he has found a way to do it and has thus asked so many elites to rally so that they can all kill her together, Green Cow sighed. It is a shame we are too weak to participate. She could probably kill us with a mean stare. Still, I'd like to go and watch. It'll take 10,000 years to witness another event like this unfold. Cheap Sheep sighed. They followed Han Sen, and while they did have good stuff to eat, they were simply born too weak. They only had gold Geno cores, and they had yet to reach Gemstone class. Cheap Sheep, where will the Illusion Alpha plan to kill Death Goddess? Han Sen walked out and asked the sheep. He thought this entire thing sounded slightly weird. After Death Goddess was born, She did not know she was the Sacred Alpha's heir. But the people in Sacred should have recognized her. She had been out and about for a long time, and yet, strangely, the folk from Sacred had not gone out in search of her. That was strange. Boss, it'll be happening near Sunset Valley. The whole Fourth God Sanctuary should know. As many elites were invited by illusion to go there, Cheap Sheep quickly answered. Green Cow said, that death goddess is way too cocky. She knows they're going to surround her there, and yet she hasn't changed course. She is going to die. Are people from Sacred joining the hunt? Han Sen asked. Cheap Sheep thought for a moment and then said, I think so. Someone saw Goddess and other Sacred elites heading for Sunset Valley. If you want to go and take a look, please take us with you. This shelter needs you guys. Who else could manage it if you are away?
Han Sen smiled.
Cheap Sheep and Green Cow smiled. They patted their chests and said, Don't worry then. With us here, this shelter will be taken care of with the utmost diligence. There is no need for you to worry. Yep, it's down to you too. Han Sen patted Cheap Sheep and Green Cow on their shoulders. He complimented them again, then returned to the Alliance. Sacred is sending people to kill Death Goddess? It looks like they don't know she was the god egg that was stolen by Destroyer Wolf. Judging from her appearance and power, though, the Sacred leader should have recognized who she was. I wonder why he couldn't. Han Sen thought about this for a while. The next day, he collected Bower, Little Silver, and Little Star, and took them with him to Sunset Valley. Han Sen wanted to find out what was up with Death Goddess, and he fancied a bit of revenge. Han Sen felt more relaxed on his travel this time, and there was no rush or need to kill creatures along the way. He went straight for Sunset Valley uninterrupted. The title Sky Sword was not something without weight. Many creatures and spirits that might have thought to bother him ran away when they realized who was coming. When he neared the valley, many other elites had already shown up. Again, they did not provoke Han Sen, for they knew all about Sky Sword. Death Goddess would take an extra few days to reach Sunset Valley, but the reason for her delay wasn't explained. She was supposed to be traveling in a straight line to get there, so no one was really sure what was going on with her sluggishness. The super elites that were invited by illusion had all gathered there. When Han Sen arrived, he was initially stopped. Sky Sword, what are you doing here? Illusion did not invite you. A beast belonging to illusion had stopped Han Sen to question him. I go wherever I want. This isn't your territory, so you have no authority to control who comes and goes, Han Sen said coldly. The beast was maddened by that, but before he made a move, many scary life forces began to approach. One of them was the Illusion Elder. There were 3 elites that were of the same strength standing next to him. They must have been the other alphas. There were super elites like Goddess and elites from Sacred too. Alpha-class elites did not participate in Divinity's bout, but they were incredibly powerful, and they definitely had the abilities to match a Son of God. But their numbers there meant Han Sen couldn't do anything. Sky Sword, Illusion has no quarrel with you. If you're here to help, we appreciate it, and your contributions will be rewarded. If not, please do us a favor and return to whence you came. The Illusion Elder spoke to Han Sen with a frown. You do your thing. I'll watch and not interfere. We won't bother each other. After Han Sen said that, he set up an airbed and took out a bunch of snacks to munch on. Bower and Little Silver dug right in, chowing down as if they were there for a proper picnic. Those of Illusion were enraged, and the other elites frowned sternly. The Elder stopped the members from doing anything, though, and he said, focus on your mission. If he doesn't enter the valley, just leave him be. After that, Illusion Elder looked at Han Sen one last time, and then returned deeper into the valley. Han Sen stayed outside the valley, waiting for Death Goddess to arrive. There were many elites waiting in Sunset Valley to kill Death Goddess, and there was no need to risk having them all as enemies. When the target appeared, he'd also have a chance to sneak in. But Han Sen was not being lazy there. When night fell, he used his Dongxian aura to hide himself. Then, he snuck into Sunset Valley in the hopes of seeing what they were all up to. They could surely take Death Goddess down anywhere, if they had a plan. So, there had to be a reason for them choosing Sunset Valley for a showdown. After Han Sen snuck inside, he noticed there was a surprising number of elites. There were far more than what he had seen from the outside. There had to be at least 100. And there were a few alphas amongst them, too. A formation like this was something even Han Sen would think twice about attacking. Even if Han Sen was not afraid of fighting against large numbers, he didn't know what geno cores the alphas possessed. If they had special powers, not being able to use Super King Spirit would put him at a major disadvantage. After sneaking across a distance of a few hundred miles, Han Sen saw an ancient mirror in the valley. That mirror was around 100 meters tall. It was gleaming brightly, reflecting the activity of everyone before it. But due to its size, its length partitioned the valley. What are they doing with such a big mirror here? What kind of geno core is that? Han Sen thought about it for a while, but he had no idea what the giant mirror might have been used for. Not far away from the mirror, the elders rested. A few of the alphas were in deep discussion. They were all holding a big flag that was caked in dust. Due to the sound of the flag rippling in the breeze, Han Sen could not discern what they were talking about. Han Sen hugged the wall and did not move. He cast the Dongxian Sutra to see if he could listen through the noise generated by the flag and hear what they were saying. The flag was powerful, and Han Sen's Dongxian aura could not work on it. Just as he was disappointed about this, he overheard another two from Illusion having a discussion. This time, we have 4 alphas and the ancient mirror. I really think we can kill Death Goddess and achieve vengeance. Oh yeah, so what is this ancient sky mirror? Can it suppress Death Goddess arrows? If they can't be stopped, we will be injured even if we can't kill her. Don't worry, it'll work. Ancient Sky Mirror is Ancient Sky Emperor's geno core. With the mirror here, we don't have to be afraid of Death Goddess. Why is that? The Alpha said it was a secret, but we'll find out soon enough. Han Sen listened to a bit more but learned nothing useful. Then, he decided to leave Sunset Valley. But Han Sen had already figured out that the Ancient Sky Mirror was for the Alphas to restrict her. In the next 2 days, more and more powerful creatures entered Sunset Valley, and from time to time members of Illusion sent messages back and forth. The activity in the valley continued to increase, and it seemed that the Death Goddess should be very close to here. Han Sen did not enter the valley. The people on both sides had nothing to do with him. When the fighting started, Han Sen would kill his enemies and leave. He didn't care much about anything else. On the 3rd day, Han Sen saw the Illusion Elder and 3 other alphas take their people out of the valley. The expressions of all the creatures were very dignified, and they looked like they were facing a major enemy. It seems that Death Goddess is coming soon. Han Sen's gaze also followed them to the distant mountains, and a dark spot gradually appeared on the horizon. Because she wasn't moving very fast, it was a long time before Han Sen could see the true appearance of the black spot. Her black hair was like a waterfall. She wore black armor with a pair of crow-like black wings behind her. Holding a black bow and arrow in her hand, she looked like an archer from hell. However, Han Sen's focus wasn't on her weapons. The delicate facial features looked exactly the same as when Han Sen first saw them, but the eyes were not as hollow as before. The black eyes were bright and pure, and Han Sen could not see through them. If a person only looked at her eyes, she would never remind anyone of the Death Goddess that terrified everyone in the 4th God Sanctuary. Seeing Death Goddess, even the Illusion Elder was intimidated. Despite their preparations, Death Goddess's face still made the gathered elites feel a little uneasy. The Illusion Elder waved slightly, and all the elites moved to their assigned positions and turned toward the entrance of Sunset Valley. The ancient mirror was the only thing that gave the Illusion Elder the confidence to attempt to kill Death Goddess. Otherwise, Death Goddess arrows might wipe out their forces before they even got close enough to kill her. That would be too much of a risk. But with this mirror, they didn't have to be afraid of her. When the Emperor of Heaven used this mirror to roam the 4th sanctuary in ancient times, no one could hurt him. If the Emperor of Heaven hadn't failed to advance to the 5th sanctuary, the ancient sky mirror wouldn't have been left behind. However, because the attributes of the ancient sky mirror were so special, only elites with the same attributes could use it. That was why the Illusion Elder chose Sunset Valley. There was a moon spring in Sunset Valley, and the power contained in the moon spring was the same as that of the ancient sky mirror. The Illusion Elder used the power of the moon spring to operate the mirror. The elites invited by the Illusion Elder knew the power of the ancient sky mirror, so even if it was a powerful being like Death Goddess, they were not afraid. All of them summoned their courage and prepared for the battle. They were keen to fight Death Goddess. Han Sen saw those great beings with full confidence. He had some doubts. It was reasonable to expect that some of the elders might escape the conning battle with their lives, but it seemed like even the less powerful creatures were quite confident. That was slightly surprising. Death Goddess had killed one of the 10 Son of Gods with a single arrow. They wouldn't have much time to deal with Death Goddess, as they might be killed instantly. What is the role of the ancient sky mirror? How will it let them face Death Goddess? Han Sen blinked and looked into the depths of Sunset Valley. There were several groups of people nearby. Apparently, they had been sent by the Illusion Elder to monitor him. Han Sen now had no chance to sneak into Sunset Valley. Seeing that Death Goddess was coming closer, many creatures held their breath, and their hearts were slightly uneasy. It was one thing to have confidence, but Death Goddess's previous kills were too scary. It was normal to be anxious when facing her. No one had retreated, and each one summoned a Geno core as they waited. It seemed that they had made up their minds to fight Death Goddess. Seeing that Death Goddess had entered the vicinity of Sunset Valley, the Illusion Elder screamed, "Death Goddess, if you swear to follow me now, I can still let you live today. Otherwise, today you will die." Everyone looked at Death Goddess and waited for her response. While everyone was keen to see Death Goddess, Han Sen was actually the most curious. He was the only one who knew the true origin of Death Goddess, but the current Death Goddess was somewhat strange to Han Sen. Death Goddess was the descendant of Sacred's master and destroyer Empress, and so the power in her body had been inherited from them. However, Han Sen used the Dongxian aura to examine Death Goddess for a long time, and he didn't feel both God power and death power in her body. Death Goddess wasn't hiding her power. Han Sen could clearly feel her strong life force, but her life force didn't seem to be tinged by sacred power or death. Instead, Han Sen felt that the power was familiar. No wonder the sacred elites can't tell where she came from. This power doesn't seem to be related to Sacred's master or destroyer Empress at all. Han Sen looked at her, frowning. He knew that she was the one who had hatched from the egg, but why would her power look like this? Han Sen had no clue. His sense of familiarity was just a feeling, as Death Goddess's power was something he had never seen before. It was understandable that Han Sen didn't immediately recognize the traces of his own power in Death Goddess. Death Goddess had the abilities of destruction and death, but because of the unexpected introduction of Han Sen's blood, the two forces had merged into a new force. Some of this new power belonged to Han Sen, so it felt familiar, but nothing more. The combination of the three forces kept this power from feeling like any of the original ones, so Han Sen couldn't sense it in detail. All the creatures were staring at Death Goddess, waiting for her answer, and waiting for her to enter a certain range. Since they had to use the moon spring to operate the ancient sky mirror, there was no way to change the location at which they would spring the attack. The scope of the mirror was limited, and they had to be within this range to attack Death Goddess. Otherwise, they wouldn't be protected by the ancient sky mirror. Death Goddess did not give a d***mn about the Illusion Elder, and she completely ignored the alphas and elites as if they did not exist. Han Sen saw that Death Goddess had flown straight toward him. He couldn't help but sigh. Will this one remember me and want to take some sort of revenge? Before Han Sen could act, Death Goddess had already flown over to him and gathered her wings to land. She looked at Han Sen with a pair of pure eyes and shouted, "Father!" For a time, all the creatures in Sunset Valley had their eyes wide open, including Han Sen himself. Wait, this is not right. I'm only here to get the goodies. What's happening now? Han Sen felt rather awkward. He turned and looked at Illusion Elder, but Illusion Elder and the others were staring back at him. Their eyes, however, looked murderous. "Pretty lady, although you look cute and sweet, and you look as if you have my genes, don't just randomly announce that." Han Sen wanted to explain he had nothing to do with Death Goddess. He didn't want to be a scapegoat. Death Goddess had slain so many spirits and creatures, she had a vast number of enemies. If he admitted that she was his daughter, the entire world would be against him. Han Sen was not afraid to face off against the fourth god's sanctuary, but she wasn't his daughter. He didn't want to become a scapegoat. Before Han Sen could finish, Illusion Elder said angrily, "No wonder we were unable to learn anything about her. She is your heir? You made her kill creatures all across the fourth god's sanctuary. Tell us why you are doing this. Otherwise, there is no need for talk. We should just kill them both now, before they bring permanent harm to the fourth god's sanctuary. Yeah, kill them. Many elites stepped forward with their Geno cores, each possessing a frightening power. They wanted to kill Han Sen and Death Goddess both. Han Sen felt terrible. This had nothing to do with him, after all. Even though he wasn't afraid of being Illusion Elder's enemy, he didn't want to start a war for no reason. As Han Sen tried to further explain, Death Goddess was already drawing her black bow. A black arrow was knocked. Death Goddess pulled back the string as far as it could go and loosed it. The raging arrow flew through the sky, driving itself into a super creature's body. The creature had to be larger than an elephant, but when the arrow pierced the beast, it exploded and died. Don't disturb me and my father's reunion. Death Goddess fired another arrow as she glared at the elites. Han Sen wished to say something more, but he stopped. People wouldn't believe anything he said now. He could see the anger burning in the crowd below, and he knew their minds couldn't be changed. D. Illusion Elder roared. He lifted an illusion disc, which was filled with holy light, as he charged towards Han Sen and Death Goddess. The other three elders and elites were headed straight for them, too. As the monsters roared, their scary powers landed. Their combined power was more intimidating than the attacks of the armored man. There was nothing Han Sen could do. He let Bauer, Little Silver, and Little Star chip in with the fight, as well. But Death Goddess flapped her wings and flew up high. The black bow in her hands was flashing. Every time it flashed, an arrow was fired, and another creature or spirit was killed. Death Goddess was aiming at the powerful Illusion Elder next, but he used the disc to block it. That powerful disc Geno core was shattered by the force of the arrow. But Death Goddess did not relent, as the flashes of arrows came thick and fast. She shot down all the creatures and spirits as she arced between them. Han Sen was frozen as he watched the spectacle. She's that strong? She is going to be as powerful as Armored Man. Han Sen was shocked. After all, Death Goddess never missed a shot. Aside from the four elders, the other super creatures were killed with a single arrow. Even the four elders had to sacrifice their Geno cores to avoid being killed. Death Goddess arrows were not like falsified sky powers, though. It wasn't as if the skill could never miss, and so it was her proficiency that shocked Han Senator. Death Goddess arrows had a strong sense of prediction. Just like when Han Sen fired his arrows, she was able to predict every possibility before letting a shot fly. Many times she appeared to be firing at nothing, but when the arrow reached the end of its flight, a creature would appear and get skewered by it. This is too much of a coincidence. Han Sen's eyes almost fell out of their sockets. If Han Sen wasn't sure he had never been unfaithful and hadn't watched her come out of an egg, he would have been convinced that she really was his daughter. But Han Sen didn't have time to think much. There were two elders coming straight for him. Not even they had expected that they'd have to deal with Han Sen. Whatever. If you guys have a death wish, don't take it out on me. Han Sen combined with Fallen Slaughter and summoned his overbearing shield and split blade. Then, he started his attack. With overbearing shield and split blade put to work, Han Sen was practically invincible. He killed a few super creatures in a moment's notice. But the confusing thing was that after Han Sen cut a super creature in half, he didn't receive an announcement. Then, he saw the creatures and spirits that were killed returning from deeper within Sunset Valley. Both Han Sen and Death Goddess kills were returning to the fight. What is this? The spirits can respawn, yes, but why the creatures? How can creatures do that? Is that the power of ancient Sky Mirror? The thought crossed Han Sen's mind. Seeing Death Goddess keep fighting in the sky, the creatures and elders did not change their perspective of the ordeal. They all continued to attack as hard as they could, without being dismayed. Before long, Han Sen was able to confirm his hypothesis. Death Goddess could not keep fighting the tide of strong elites, and those four elders were brutally powerful too. Death Goddess could be destructive, but her body wasn't invincible. For elders could definitely destroy her body. Han Sen heard the sound of flesh being torn. Death Goddess armor was cut by an elder. It was a strike that led to the flow of blood. Death Goddess turned and fired at the elder's head. The elder disappeared, but not long after, he was conning back from Sunset Valley. Han Sen used his overbearing shield to break a super creature's skull. He held Split Blade tight and took off running into the valley. He had to get rid of the mirror. Not even God could save them if he didn't. Seeing Han Sen run into Sunset Valley, the elders tried to surround him. The super elites came to circle Han Sen, too. He suddenly became the focus of the battle, and not as many super elites were going for Death Goddess now. Surrounding Han Sen never worked. With his Dongshin movement, he could easily escape any possible entrapment. And in this way, he slipped away and proceeded onwards into Sunset Valley. Many super elites were going after him, but two of the elders just laughed coldly at Han Senator. They didn't chase him, and instead, they went after Death Goddess. Death Goddess armor was broken. Her arrows might have been indestructible, but her body wasn't. She looked to be in terrible condition. Has he breached Sunset Valley? Illusion Elder asked the two elders who were coming toward him. He has, one elder answered. Illusion Elder smiled grimly. Good, this is the perfect setup for Death Goddess. Using it on him will work just as well. I will kill Death Goddess and Sky Sword today. I will shock the entire Fourth God Sanctuary, one elder happily proclaimed. The three elders invited there by Illusion Elder were all from smaller groups. They were weaker than Illusion Elder, and they were excited to kill someone that strong. The really important elders, like Dark Spirit, were not as easy to invite along. Ignore that thought. Let's just focus on actually killing Death Goddess first. Illusion Elder rallied the other three elders to attack Death Goddess. Han Sen was on his way into Sunset Valley. Little Star carried Bower and Little Silver through the canyon walls, following after their master. They were deep into the mountains soon enough, and eventually, the elites could not keep track of them. Due to the numbers that Death Goddess was killing, the super elites kept on coming out of Sunset Valley. Han Sen looked at Ancient Sky Mirror and saw a super creature come out of it. Han Sen had killed the creature once before, but there it was, coming out of that mirror. Han Sen now knew for certain that the mirror could revive the dead. But Han Sen had no idea how such a thing would work. Han Sen also knew that Death Goddess was doing poorly. She wasn't related to him, but he'd still prefer it if she didn't die. He moved his split blade in a strike at the mirror. Han Sen's slash was obscenely powerful. It was something no creature in the Fourth God's Sanctuary would underestimate. Split blade could tear through the fabric of space and even break Geno cores. The unleashed swordlight hit the mirror and spread out across it. Unfortunately, it brought no harm to the mirror. This gave Han Sen quite the shock. Han Sen kept on slashing, and as he did, he noticed something rather weird. Ancient Sky Mirror was a mirror. When Han Sen hit it, it would reflect the image of Han Sen hitting it. The swordlight would connect inside the mirror and outside the mirror. The strange thing was that the swordlight inside the mirror wasn't merely a visual reflection. Two powers met inside the mirror and extinguished themselves. And that meant the power Han Sen unleashed would deal no actual damage to the mirror he sought to destroy. Han Sen changed tactics and attacked the mirror directly with Split Blade. Swordlights could be a reflection, but the world inside the mirror was not real. Now that the blade was hitting the mirror, Han Sen thought he could damage it. But when he struck it, his face changed. His split blade and the mirror split blade reached toward each other. When they struck each other, Han Sen was sent staggering back. The strike hadn't hit the mirror. It hit the split blade inside the mirror, and the split blade that came against him possessed the same power he himself had unleashed. The mirror was undamaged, and Han Sen was sent reeling backward. Han Sen frowned. This was far too weird. No power could deal any damage to the mirror. It didn't seem likely that he could damage it. Han Sen used a few different elements to attack, but the results were the same. No matter what power he used, it was reflected. It's no wonder the elders didn't follow me. They knew I'd be unable to break the mirror, Han Sen thought to himself. If I can't break the mirror, there is only one thing left for me to do. Han Sen looked murderous. He summoned his God Geno core and overbearing shield. He brought out the Bloodlust Ant King glyph and transformed into Fallen Slaughter. Then Han Sen used all that power to hit the monsters trying to come out of the mirror. There was a loud noise, and a monster that was bigger than two elephants broke under the attack. It bled profusely as it got crushed. Han Sen looked cold, but Splitblade did not stop there. He used it against the lance of an incoming spirit and cut through his entire body. Blood was everywhere, with screaming too. All the creatures and spirits that were trying to come through the mirror were now getting stuck inside it. Han Sen killed them, and they respawned. And those creatures and spirits just kept on respawning, without any of them being able to kill Han Sen before fully exiting the mirror. More and more beings were becoming trapped in the mirror now. Fewer and fewer enemies attacked Death Goddess, freeing her up. When she killed 2 of the elders, they respawned at the mirror and ended up trapped. They were unable to rejoin the fray. Now that they were trapped by Han Sen, they couldn't leave. Han Sen used his Dongshin Sutra and Heavenly Go in tandem with his blade and shield. He trapped 2 elders and all the other beings in the valley. Illusion Elder noticed that no one was returning to the fight, and he was confused about what was happening. At that moment, he was killed by Death Goddess. He realized as he died that Han Sen must have blocked the mirror. The idea of one person holding off 100 elites was stunning. It is no wonder he made it out of Outer Sky Shelter. He is so powerful, not even elders are as good as him. Illusion Elder and the other elders were all in shock. They wanted to leave, but they became more and more hopeless. The mirror was too crowded, and there was nothing they could do to fight Han Senator. They kept on getting killed by him. All the elites outside the valley were now dead. Death Goddess, who had been wholly stained with blood, now raced into the valley. She joined in, helping Han Sen endlessly slay the elites with her arrows. The elders hadn't expected a situation like this, and they all sounded furious over what was happening. Sky Sword, I will eat you, and you will never come back, Illusion Elder roared. Save your threats until you escape the mirror, Han Sen said coldly as he killed another spirit. The overbearing shield effortlessly blocked Illusion Elder's Geno Core attacks. Ancient Sky Mirror was good. It could respawn them and their Geno Cores, so death did not mean much to them. That seemed very strange to Han Senator. No Geno Core had endless power. Not even Emperor-class Geno Cores could keep respawning indefinitely, like the mirror was currently doing. But there it was, not getting any weaker. Han Sen wanted to keep on killing and see if he could exhaust the mirror's power, anyway. But no matter how long he fought, it did not seem to work. The mirror really did seem to have an endless supply of power. Illusion Elder said, no matter how strong you, and that be *TCHR, it's useless. We are immortal. You will spend all your power eventually. When the time comes, we will eat you alive. Many super elites roared and surged out of the mirror. They all looked so angry, wanting to consume Han Sen and Death Goddess. They had the power of the mirror, so they weren't afraid of dying. It sure gave Han Sen a headache. And just as Illusion Elder said, Han Sen's power really was limited. The fight had already cost him a lot of energy, and he had used Beast Souls. Han Sen didn't think he could last much more than 10 hours, and when he reached the point of exhaustion, he wouldn't be able to fend them all off anymore. Death Goddess was in poorer shape too. She could constantly replenish her arrows, but her wounds kept bleeding. Her recovery speed was most certainly not as good as her attacks. Little Silver, heal her wounds.
Han Sen shouted.
Little Star brought Little Silver and Bower out from a wall. Little Silver sat on Little Star, showering Death Goddess with his silver lightning. Death Goddess' body shook, and she stopped firing the bow. The lightning caused her excruciating pain, but her wounds healed swiftly. Little Silver's healing abilities were effective. What sucked was how much it hurt. It wasn't like ordinary healing powers that only provided relief. Death Goddess knew Little Silver was healing her, though. She endured the pain and started drawing back her bow again. The power was just as strong. She was just a little slower. Now that he had healed Death Goddess wounds, Han Sen still had to sort out the energy problem. Little Silver was not a pure healer, so he couldn't replenish a person's vigor and energy. Han Sen kept on thinking as he fought. He thought that if he was unable to break the mirror, they could all very well die. But the ancient sky mirror was far too creepy. Han Sen had looked behind the mirror, and there was nothing strange back there. It was just a silver surface, and there was no power pack or control panel. Up until today, the mirror was left unused in this abandoned valley. There must be a reason, Han Sen thought to himself. Obviously, Illusion Elder could not control Ancient Sky Mirror. Otherwise, he wouldn't have placed it there. If no one can control the mirror, does that mean it is a Geno core owned by no one? Han Sen's eyes brightened when that thought crossed his mind. Han Sen looked around, but he was unable to see anyone actually controlling it. This was something he was very sure about. Illusion Elder, do you really think a simple mirror will keep you all alive? Han Sen directed his speech to Illusion Elder, who was still shouting. Ah, long enough for me to kill you, yes? Illusion Elder gnashed his teeth as he spoke. It is a shame you are unable to control the Geno core. I'm sure if you could kill me, Han Sen went on to say. It's still enough to kill you, another elder roared. Han Sen was now certain that they were unable to control the mirror. That fact made him very happy. If it had been a self-Geno core, Han Sen didn't think he could fight it. But it wasn't, and so that meant Han Sen stood a chance. Han Sen ignored the screams of the elites and elders, and he found a spot. With his finger, he pointed at the mirror. A drop of blood came out of his finger and landed on the mirror. Illusion Elder thought Han Sen was trying to break it, so he sneered. Nothing can hurt the mirror. You're wasting your time. Han Sen ignored him, though. He looked at the drop of blood that planted itself on the mirror as the reflective version of the drop of blood also came against the surface. When the two drops hit each other, they began to spread across the mirror. Han Sen was very happy about this. He had used his real blood Geno core into his own blood, then put one drop onto the mirror. That blood now had real blood's power. If it was not simply cancelled by the mirror, it would be absorbed by the item. The mirror would be gifted Han Sen's power and be wholly controlled by him. If a Geno core like this had a current owner, it would be hard to take. But this one did not have an owner, and so it would be easily taken. Real blood wasn't super obvious, but it was now around the size of a man's hand. But that soon spread larger and larger, wider and wider. Illusion Elder was very angry with Han Sen and Death Goddess. In his blind rage, he had not noticed the changes occurring to the mirror. By the time the elites realized that something was happening, the blood had already taken over half of the mirror. The top part was dyed red. When Illusion Elder noticed the changes in the mirror, he was very shocked. The super elites started to shout, "What's happening to the mirror? What did he do to the mirror?" Even Illusion Elder and the other three elders were in shock. They had used the ancient sky mirror because it was a safe haven, but now they found themselves unable to escape from their refuge. Some super elites began to wish that they had never used the mirror at all. "You've only just now noticed?" Han Sen said with dark amusement. The red color continued to spread across the mirror. It was a real blood invasion. Real blood's takeover always started out slow, but the more of the Geno core real blood gained control over, the faster the process would go. Pang! The super elites wanted to escape, but they could only hit the bloody reflective surface. They couldn't exit like they had earlier. All the creatures and spirits kept pounding the mirror, like a swarm of imprisoned monsters. They were terrified as they struck the glass wall that stood between them and freedom. They couldn't get out. Shoal, what did you do? The few elders looked surprised. When the super creatures were killed, they'd end up locked inside the mirror. And as Han Sen watched them try to escape, it felt like he was watching a horde of rabid demons from hell. Han Sen was delighted that he had managed to take control of Ancient Sky Mirror, though. Not only could the object revive fallen comrades, but it could also trap others inside. Han Sen hadn't expected the mirror to have such versatility. Real blood gained full control of the mirror, and the connection was established directly between the captive mirror and Han Sen's brain. The creatures and spirits all crowded to the front of the mirror in a frightened and angry mob. They kept pounding the bloody surface. Han Sen thought they looked like a horde of zombies trapped inside a container. Han Sen and Death Goddess proceeded to kill the remaining spirits and creatures that were outside the mirror. Once that was done, all their enemies were trapped inside the mirror. Han Sen then took control of the mirror, forcing it to rise up slowly into the sky. Rocks broke and tumbled away from the base of the mirror as it rose, and cracks shot across the length of the valley.
Impossible.
How can the mirror be controlled?
Impossible.
The beings in the mirror were all so shocked. The mirror's power was special, So finding someone else of the same element to control it was thought to be impossible. They had been happy to add their reflections to the mirror. It did not matter if they were injured or killed. They could come back. In many ways, they were invincible. But they knew the implications of the mirror being under someone's control. If someone gained possession of the mirror, that person would control all the reflections that the mirror held. They really didn't want to believe that Han Sen had asserted control over the thing. Unfortunately, it was an undeniable truth. Katja, ancient sky mirror, tore its way up out of the ground. The place where the mirror had rested was now seeping blood like a red fountain. It was like a spring of infinite power. Han Sen realized now that the mirror was using that as a source of constant energy. It was how it kept on reviving the elites who had died. Sky Sword, this grudge seems to reside between you and illusion only. Let us go. If you touch the rest of us, that means you will be going up against the rest of the fourth god's sanctuary. One of the elites yelled. Yeah, this has nothing to do with us. Let us go or Een Demon will come after you. The Manlong are heroes. If you kill me, they'll kill you. I, Long Mei. Goddess was inside there, as well. She was in shock, and she shouted, Han Sen, if you let us go, Sacred will forgive the grudge it has with you. Han Sen did not care, though. All he did was stare at them, letting them yell in anger, sadness, and desperation. Whatever their expression, Han Sen did not care. The mirror slowly flew to Han Sen, and as it did, it became smaller. When it reached his hand, it was only around the size of his palm. He was easily able to grab it. Sky Sword, if you touch us, you will die. Illusion Elder roared, but he was obviously trying to suppress his fear. Han Sen used his mind to blow up Illusion Elder's body. The mirror was dyed red once more. Berserk super creature Illusion Beast killed.
No Beast Soul Gun.
Geno core destroyed. The flesh has been destroyed. The life Geno essence is missing. Han Sen was surprised. This was the first he had never received a life Geno essence. After watching Illusion Elder's sudden demise, everyone became angry and shocked. The rest of Illusion went mad. Han Sen used his mind to kill all the yelling monsters. And seeing that, none of the others dared to speak now. They were all in shock. But the creatures that were killed inside the mirror did not leave anything behind. He noticed there really weren't any life Geno essences being made available. They had life Geno essences, but the mirror absorbed them. They made the mirror stronger. Han Sen took the mirror and went to sit on Little Star's back. He wanted to leave the valley. Death Goddess came to sit down on it too. She did so naturally, as if it was something she was used to doing. Han Sen felt as if he had a bit of a headache. But since Han Sen couldn't undo what had happened, and she seemed to consider him family, he was willing to take her back. News of the fight spread across all of the fourth god's sanctuary. The stories of the fight seemed impossible, but many spirits and creatures had come to watch the attack on Death Goddess. There were too many witnesses for the stories to all be lies. Han Sen and Death Goddess killed the elites of many tribes, and he had even taken the mirror. News of this was everywhere, on the tip of every tongue in the fourth god's sanctuary. The most shocking news was that Death Goddess was Skysword's daughter. It was difficult to believe, but Death Goddess had said it herself. It was rather surprising, and as they were all shocked, many were also angry. A storm was brewing. Han Sen knew things wouldn't be resolved quickly if he was willing to let the creatures and spirits he had collected go. And of course, Han Sen was not going to do that, so, when he returned, he prepared for a fight. Before, Han Sen might have been scared at the prospect of taking on the whole sanctuary. After all, it was hard to fight with fists. No matter how strong he was, people would be affected. But with Ancient Sky Mirror, things were now very different. Han Sen did not have to be afraid. Have you heard? Death Goddess is Han Sen's daughter. That can't be true. There is no way a human can have a daughter like that. And even if it was true, she could not enter the sanctuaries at her age. And she definitely couldn't have already reached the fourth god's sanctuary and achieved that much strength. Death Goddess admitted it herself. She called Han Sen her father. And she didn't just say it once. How can this not be true then? I would say he's more of a daddy figure. It doesn't matter either way. Han Sen is going to be famous this time. For elders, and over 100 elites were trapped by those two. I don't know if the beings he trapped can get out alive, even if he let them. I am afraid Han Sen is the strongest human there is, dollar aside. Strong is strong, but he's in trouble. He has bit off way more than he can chew by going after that many shelters. No tribe's elder has a fancy for him. They all want a piece of him. I hope he can hold it together. I don't want to see those creatures kill him. Han Sen gained a lot of territory for humanity in the third god's sanctuary. Perhaps in the fourth god's sanctuary, he can do the same. That is difficult to say. It is not difficult to say. Let's just see if he can survive this next attack first. He is currently the #1 enemy of everyone in the fourth god's sanctuary. That's true. Fairly annoying, if you ask me. Han Sen was in the sanctuary each day after that, but no elite or elder had shown up. But the shelter did seem to keep getting attacked. Strangely, groups of toxic bugs, monsters, and flying creatures occasionally swarmed toward them. And after Han Sen came back, the shelter's connections with the rest of the sanctuary went silent. Their connection to the outside world was cut off, and Shadow Shelter became like an isolated island. Any creature that ventured too far from the shelter would go missing. Luckily, Han Sen was prepared. The mirror was securely inside the shelter now, and the creatures in the shelter all made a copy of themselves inside it. Queen, Lin Feng, and Jing Jiwu were each very excited. They reflected themselves so they could go fight without the worry of death. They could keep having deadly, risky fights with creatures to level up. But they had maxed out their sacred Geno points and were unable to absorb life Geno essences. This made them unable to level up. The life Geno essences of the fourth god's sanctuary were difficult to absorb, and the Geno fluid the Alliance had produced did not work there. Even if Han Sen gave them a bunch of life Geno essences, there was nothing he could to make them work. Han Sen was not a scientist either, so it was a problem he could not solve. But the spirits and creatures had become target practice. Aside from Gu Qingqing and Little Pony, all the creatures had been doing some manner of fighting. The mirror might be here, but you should still be careful. The really powerful elders haven't shown themselves yet. And when they do show up, they will be able to deal with Ancient Sky Mirror, Gu Qingqing warned Han Sen. Don't worry about me. I have a way to deal with them.
Han Sen smiled.
Gu Qingqing shook her head. Don't underestimate the elders of the tribes. There is one scary guy in particular who might come. Who? Han Sen was surprised to hear this. If Gu Qingqing feared this person, then they must have been wretchedly strong. In the divinities about 100 years ago, one person was able to beat 6 paths and obtain first place. He received God's baptism. So, after all these years, I can't imagine how strong he might have gotten. What is his name? Han Sen was still not worried. He knew the truth about God's baptism, and it seemed unlikely that this person had received it. When people won first rank, all they'd see was a sealed-up crystal container. None were able to open it, and they could only go back. The reward for reaching first rank was unavailable. Stay up late had been there for many years, so it was useless. It's Ancient Devil, Gu Qingqing said. Ancient Devil? Han Sen was shocked to hear this. He knew the name well. He was the master of Dragon King, Xiang Yin, and Sky King. He was betrayed by Azura. Han Sen knew Ancient Devil had ascended to reach the fourth god's sanctuary, but he never suspected he'd become so strong he was able to defeat 6 paths. You saw Ancient Devil? Gu Qingqing saw Han Sen's reaction and looked surprised. I have. Han Sen hadn't actually seen Ancient Devil, though. He was just very familiar with him. Thinking of Ancient Devil, Han Sen thought about Xiang Yin. He had never heard much about her, and he hadn't a clue where she might have gone. If she hadn't fallen, she might have learned that Han Sen was in the fourth god's sanctuary and sought him out. Han Sen just hoped she hadn't been killed. If a lady like her had died, it would have been a sad thing. Why are you saying Ancient Devil might come, anyway? Han Sen asked. Ancient Devil had no grudge against him. He was not an elder either. He was just a creature that came to the fourth god's sanctuary. Gu Qingqing sighed and said, I have seen Ancient Devil. He seems to have a deep relationship with Sacred's leader. If Sacred's leader comes, then Ancient Devil might come, too. Han Sen nodded and asked about Ancient Devil. Gu Qingqing thought about her answer and said, ancient devil is strange. He's like a human, but I don't think he is. His power is odd, as well. How so? Han Sen asked. I have seen him 4 times. Each time, he wielded a different power. A completely different one. Time and space elements included. Every time he strikes, it is hard. He has enough power to go against any demigod. It's just difficult to believe he has so many elements. It is hard for humans to have multiple, and they usually stick to focusing on just one. When I saw him, all his powers were on the same level. There was no bias, Gu Qingqing said thoughtfully. Han Sen frowned. That really was weird. Aside from Han Sen, no others could use multiple elements. Not even spirits or creatures could. While it was beneficial for Han Sen to have so many elements, he didn't have the same proficiency with any particular element as someone who explicitly trained with just the one. Gu Qingqing said Ancient Devil had many elements, and they were all incredibly good. That was scary. After a few days, many creatures and spirits had come to harass the shelter. There hadn't yet been any elites, though. Still, with Ancient Sky Mirror there, Han Sen didn't lose much. The place did not have the power of Moon Spring, but Ancient Sky Mirror had many super elites inside it. When the mirror started to lose energy, Han Sen could refine the souls inside for nourishment. As a result, there was no need for concern with the mirror's energy. Of the creatures that were killed, some were eaten and some were absorbed by the mirror. It wasn't much energy, but it was better than nothing. Han Sen kept on practicing with the Dongxian Sutra. He needed his bulwark umbrella to become super, and when that was done, he could focus on leveling up to reach the 5th sanctuary. The 4th god sanctuary could not help him much more, so Han Sen didn't want to delay his ascension any longer than was necessary. He needed to go to the 5th sanctuary so he could get his Geno armor. His position until then wouldn't be ideal, as going up against god-class sorts wouldn't be easy. A person came to Shadow Shelter, waving and shouting at Sheep who stood atop one of the towers. Wait, I come in peace. Sheep saw the human below, and so he went to tell Han Sen. Han Sen came out and learned it was God's retribution. A long time had passed since they had last seen each other, but the man hadn't changed much. God's retribution. What are you doing at Shadow Shelter? Han Sen stood atop the tower and spoke to the man below him. He didn't invite him in. We are old friends. Are you going to treat me like this? Invite me in so we can have a cup of tea together, God's retribution said with a smile. This is bad timing. Unfortunately, I can't invite you in. Say what you have come to say, and then leave. Otherwise, the creatures out there might believe you're one of us. And that won't bode well for you, Han Sen said. I am here to talk about the prospect of cooperation, God's retribution said. Cooperation? In what way?
Han Sen loked surprised.
How about finding someplace quiet we can discuss this? God's retribution asked. Han Sen asked someone to invite him in. With the power that God's retribution wielded, it'd probably easy for him to break Shadow Shelter's defense. Anyway, he was being polite by not immediately smashing his way in. So, what do you mean by cooperation? Han Sen sat down and asked him in the hall. God's retribution smiled and said, I am here to talk about Blood Legion. If you are willing to help us, we are willing to help you with your predicament. What do you guys want? Han Sen didn't think God's retribution would help him out of the kindness of his heart. He was here for something. I love talking to people like you. God's retribution looked right at him and continued by saying, we want Snake Witch's Geno armor. If we get that armor, Blood Legion will help you through this. Han Sen looked confused, and he asked, Snake Witch? Who is that? I've never heard of her. God's retribution frowned. Do you have to do this? God's organization sent Snake Witch to steal your son, Little Flower. I don't know if she's dead or alive, but don't tell me you didn't do it. Now Han Sen realized who Snake Witch must have been, and he knew she must have been an elite who had Geno armor. Bauer did it. She killed an elite with Geno armor? Is she really that strong? Han Sen was surprised. He thought Bauer simply killed a high-tier demigod. His little baby was scarier than he originally thought, and God's organization was stronger than he thought now, too. They had members with Geno armor. If you give us the Geno armor, Blood Legion will help you sort this problem out, God's retribution said. Han Sen looked at him with amusement and asked, Aren't you considered a traitor to Blood Legion? Since when have you begun representing them? Blood Legion is different now. The leader has a few descendants, and I'm okay there with them. God's retribution touched his nose. Anyway, don't change the subject. Just tell me if you want to cooperate on this. I would like to cooperate with you guys, but I don't have the Geno armor. Han Sen shrugged. You don't? How? I thought you killed her. God's retribution shifted his eyes across Han Sen. I'm not that powerful.
Han Sen smiled.
God's retribution looked at him with disdain and said, Stop pretending in front of me. I know you already got armor from Tina, and you can already use it. Aside from you, who else might be able to kill Snake Witch? Believe me or not, but I didn't kill her, and I don't have her armor. Han Sen put out his hands. God's retribution looked at Han Sen and said, I can only suspect you don't understand how serious these matters are. The people who want to get rid of you are not just the elites in the sanctuary. Both God's organization and the new community want you gone, as well. Without our help, even if you survive what comes immediately next, Shadow Shelter and all your followers will die. Do you really think the mirror can stop the forces of all the fourth God's sanctuary? I really want to cooperate with you, but again, I don't have the armor. If I did, I'd be giving it to you right now. Han Sen looked sincere. Han Sen wasn't lying, though. He hadn't seen Snake Witch, and Bauer said she killed a person who wished to kill her. She said she broke the woman. It didn't sound like a Geno armor was left. You should still think about it. God's organization has decided to kill you. It does not matter even if you are related to Han Jinji. Aside from Blood Legion, no one can help you. God's retribution did not believe Han Sen. Han Sen asked, What grudge does God's organization have with me? Anyway, why do they want to get me? And why do they want my son? Do they just want to use him to threaten me? You might be Han Jinji's heir, and that is a sin. If they had been able to identify you and use you to draw Han Jinji out, you'd have been killed a long time ago. God's retribution sighed. They want Little Flower because he is special. He might be able to prove you are Han Jinji's heir, even if you don't look like you are. They can use him for confirmation. Special? What is special about him? Han Sen was shocked. Did they find out that Little Flower is already stronger than most people? After 10 years, she hasn't grown up. Don't you think that's strange? God's retribution said. Han Sen sighed, and he knew this was something he couldn't hide from. He was prepared for such questions, though. That being said, what is the grudge between Han Jinji and God's organization? Why do they want to kill Han Jinji and his heirs? Han Sen did not talk about Bauer and just shifted the subject. We have investigated this for a while, but we don't have answers. We can only presume Han Jinji stole something from them, but they don't actively go around killing others. They simply want this item back. If they wanted to kill mercilessly, you'd have been killed a long time ago. That was a sickening thought. Han Sen asked, What did Han Jinji steal? I don't know. It must be some kind of gene or something. Otherwise, they wouldn't care about you and Little Flower. They want to investigate Little Flower's body once they get their hands on him. God's retribution then paused for a moment. How about we cooperate? It'll benefit you. Just one Geno armor, right? You already have a spare. Han Sen gave a wry smile and said, Brother, if I had it, I'd give it to you. But I really don't have it. I really did not kill Snake Witch. I have never even seen her before. God's retribution stared at Han Sen for a while, and it really seemed that he wasn't lying. God's retribution frowned. Well, if it wasn't you, who else might have killed Snake Witch? I don't know. Many can do that in the Alliance, right?
Han Sen sighed.
God's retribution said, Not many. Aside from a few members in Blood Legion, it'd be people who had Geno armor. Not many Geno armors exist in the Alliance, and they are mostly controlled by God's organization. Aside from you, I'm not sure who else might have done it, and God's organization is certain it was you. If I'm right, the creatures in the fourth God's sanctuary go to the Alliance when they level up, Han Sen said to God's retribution. God's retribution did not hide this. He nodded and said, You are correct. The fourth God's sanctuary is the end. Once you're done here, you're back to the Alliance. But don't think that going to the Alliance requires Geno armor. That is incorrect. Creatures that go from the fourth god's sanctuary to the Alliance will have their fitness decrease. That is because evolving the body requires energy. It will, however, purify your genes. Your body will end up stronger, but your fitness will be much lower. Then you practice, and eventually you level up and get your Geno armor. How many members of Blood Legion have Geno armor? Han Sen was not surprised by what he was being told. He already knew this stuff. None. Blood Legion is different from normal creatures. You know we have the powers of blue blood. When we go back to the Alliance, we don't rebuild our bodies. So, we don't generate Geno armor. God's retribution gave a wry smile. Han Sen was shocked by this revelation. He did not expect Blood Legion's members to be that special. Han Sen thought the blue blood power was special, yes, but that its effectiveness was reserved for the sanctuaries. Let me tell you a secret, while I'm still here. God's retribution squinted his eyes and said, the creatures that rise from the fourth god's sanctuary, aside from Blood Legion and rare creatures, are captured by God's organization. That isn't a secret. I already know that. Han Sen lifted his lips. Then you must not know that the creatures of God's organization, when they generate Geno armor, disappear and never appear again. God's retribution squinted his eyes. Really? Han Sen was shocked and his face changed. Those words made him understand a lot. The leader of the new community told Han Yufei that if he generated a Geno armor, he would know the truth. Stay Up Late told Han Sen that the Alliance was a part of the sanctuaries. The sanctuaries were something more akin to a kindergarten. They protected different races. And after the things Han Sen had seen with Guardian Spirit, he now understood a lot more. Gathering Geno armor can force you out of the Alliance? That means when Dad gets his Geno armor, he'll face a crisis. Han Sen was shocked. That isn't right, though. If things are like that, then why would so many Geno armor elites be in God's organization? Wait, no. The creatures in God's organization are not the real Geno armor elites. They are just creatures that reached the fifth sanctuary. They haven't generated their own armors. The Geno armor they possess comes from places like the Hero's Spirit Hall, left over from Geno armor elites. Now Han Sen understood everything. After Han Sen understood this, he almost jumped out of his chair with his racing heartbeat. In that case, Han Yufei thought he was finding answers, but he was actually dying. Now Han Sen knew why God's organization was strong. They still could not control the Alliance. They wanted to, but they couldn't. Or they just did not have the chance. Once their members got Geno armor, they would be out of the Alliance. And that would be useless. The creatures without Geno armor were strong, but they were not strong enough to be invincible. Even if they used a set of armor that didn't belong to them, they could not use its entire strength. At least the members of Blood Legion could fight them. Han Sen wished he could find Han Yufei and tell him the truth. Tell him not to generate the armor. Otherwise, their family would never have a reunion. Based on what Han Sen had seen in the Hero's Spirit Hall, many elites had been lost in the outside. The chance Han Yufei could come back was very low. But Han Sen didn't know how to contact his father. He didn't even know how to contact Blind Man. Because Han Sen could not provide the Geno armor, he was unable to strike a deal with God's retribution. But Han Sen wasn't expecting anyone to help him in the first place. He might be in danger in the Alliance, but he didn't think God's organization could bring him any harm in the fourth God's sanctuary. After sending God's retribution away, Han Sen returned to the Alliance. Then, he allowed Zero to follow him back into the sanctuary. When Zero entered the sanctuary, she appeared next to him. Han Sen told her to look after the shelter in his absence, and if anything awry occurred, to contact him as soon as possible. How do I call Dad and tell him not to generate a Geno armor? Han Sen thought to himself. Unfortunately, he was unable to come up with a solution. To prevent God's organization from finding him, Han Yufei did not leave a way for Han Sen to contact him. It looks like I'm going to have to go to planet Tarik. Han Sen prepared to fly his unicorn beetle to planet Tarik. It was the headquarters of the new community. Before Han Sen left, Zero came from the shelter and told Han Sen something had happened. Han Yufei had said it would take him 2 years to generate the Geno armor, so he wouldn't be done yet. Han Sen decided to run back to the sanctuary. Ancient Sky Mirror was in Han Sen's shelter. The creatures there could not be harmed, but a few creatures had been killed not too far from the shelter. "Boss, you were here." Black Steel Wolf died somehow, and there were no wounds. Cheap Sheep had some people guarding the body, and he ran up to Han Sen when he showed up. The creatures in Shadow Shelter were very proud and fearless because of the presence of the Mio. Now that the mirror no longer seemed to work, and a creature had flat out died, fear started to take hold. Even the sheep was scared. Han Sen didn't say anything. He walked to a few corpses and asked Gu Qingqing, who was looking after them, "Sister Gu, how did they die?" Gu Qingqing stood up and shook her head. "I don't see a wound on any of them. Even if there were wounds, with the mirror there, they shouldn't have died." Han Sen frowned. Gu Qingqing did not have an answer either. If the mirror hadn't protected them, then the way they died must have been unique. Han Sen squatted and checked the dead bodies. Even while using his Dongxian aura, he was unable to discern anything. Han Sen did not hesitate as he drew out Taya. He cut open Black Steel Wolf's body to get a look inside and see if there was anything the others had missed. There was nothing to be seen that way either. There was nothing out of the ordinary, and it seemed as if they had died of natural causes. "Bury them," Han Sen commanded Cheap Sheep as he stood up. Then he went on to say, "Get everyone back to the shelter. No one leaves the shelter without my permission." Cheap Sheep and Green Cow went off to do their thing, while Gu Qingqing and Han Sen went back to the shelter. "Found anything?" Gu Qingqing asked. "No," Han Sen shook his head. He couldn't tell how the enemy had killed Black Steel Wolf. The only Ling he knew for certain was that the power could defy the mirror. Han Sen also knew that if the enemy could now circumvent the mirror, they wouldn't stop killing anytime soon. So, Han Sen made sure everyone returned to the shelter to see if he could draw the enemy out that way. If he was able to learn what power they were using, Han Sen could figure out what would best work against it. Back in the shelter, Han Sen sat in the spirit hall using his Dongxian Sutra. He was able to watch the movement of every creature in every corner of the vicinity with a close eye. No movement would be able to escape Han Sen's attention now, so he waited for the enemy to strike again. "Father." As Han Sen took a swig of tea in the hall, Death Goddess approached. "Minjer, come have tea with me." Han Sen beckoned her near and got her to sit down. Then, he poured her a cup of tea. Having been with her for a while, Han Sen noticed how sincere she was when she referred to him as her father. Her mind was surprisingly naive, and she wasn't really all that evil. Han Sen took her as a daughter and gave her the name Han Minjer in return. Han Sen wasn't very good at naming things, so it was something simple enough. Death Goddess was now his daughter, and with everything feeling like a dream lately, he used that name. Death Goddess sat down near Han Sen and downed her tea in one shot. She was like a robot, and it didn't look as if she was enjoying the tea. That is not how you drink tea. You need to slow down. Han Sen smiled and poured her more tea. Then, he showed her. Han Minjer looked at Han Sen, and then looked at his face. She tried to mimic his manner of tea etiquette, but she still looked rather robotic in her attempt. "Is there a special meaning behind the way you drink?" After she drank it, her black eyes showed visible confusion. To her, drinking tea like that was simply slower. The sips were smaller, and that was the only difference. Han Sen smiled and stroked her hair that was like a waterfall. He told her, "You are still young, so I don't expect you to understand right now. You'll get it when you grow up."
Han Menger nodded.
She still tried to drink as Han Sen did, but that confusion never left her face. Han Minjer looked at Han Sen and copied a lot of his precise movements. Han Sen brought her some dim sum. She looked powerful in the fourth god's sanctuary, and thus far, no one had been able to beat her. And that was with her being a kid who had only just been born. Bauer came out of nowhere and sat on Han Sen's chest. She said, "Daddy, Bauer wants dim sum." Han Sen gave some dim sum to Bauer then, and the three of them ate merrily. Days like that were lovely, and it would only have been more perfect if Ji Yanran and Little Flower were there. But not long after, Han Sen's face changed. He stood up and teleported to the tower. He saw a guard, Bone who had a gold Geno core, was lying dead on the ground. But there were no visible wounds.
Han Sen looked glum.
He had been keeping an eye on the entire shelter, and Bone died under his watch. What's more, he couldn't even tell how. Although he had been drinking tea with Han Minjer and Bauer, Dongxian aura was on the whole time. It was surveying everything. Han Sen saw Bone Witch clearly. She had been watching from atop the tower, and as she was on her patrol, she simply died. There had been no warning signs, and Han Sen did not witness any external power come to kill Bone Witch. It was like she had suddenly died of old age. Gu Qingqing arrived at the tower, and she didn't look too happy either. She had been watching the shelter as well. She had no idea how Bone Witch died, and that made her even angrier than Han Sen. Queen and Lin Feng came running, but they did not speak when they saw the body. This had exceeded everyone's expectations, and no one could tell how Bone Witch had died. Ancient Sky Mirror was there, and if Bone Witch had been hurt by anything, she should have respawned at the mirror. But there she was, undeniably dead. Everyone in the shelter was now very afraid. They thought that with the mirror in their shelter, they had no reason to fear death. But now that the mirror had lost its effectiveness, their nerves started to creep up on them. Now that they did not seem to have the mirror's protection, many creatures were very scared when they thought about the elites that were coming for them. They thought that their days were numbered. They buried Bone Witch's body, and then Han Sen called for a gathering where every key figure of the shelter had to attend. Queen, you and Lin Feng should return to the Alliance. I will call you back when things are resolved. Han Sen spoke to the humans. Queen shook her head, and Wang Yuhang said angrily, Little Han, who do you think we are? Do you think we are the sort of people who leech off others and run off at the first sight of danger? Lin Feng patted Wang Yuhang on the shoulder and added, Calm down, little uncle. You know that is not what he was implying. After that, Lin Feng spoke directly to Han Sr. This situation is grim. We don't know how they managed to get Bone Witch, but there are certain predictions we can make. What is there to predict? Tang Zhenliu did not understand. Lin Feng smiled and said, The situation seems dire, but if you were an enemy that could kill others randomly and at will, would you go for a simple guard? It means that there is a limit to the enemy's power. This foe is unable to kill anyone they wish to. Maybe he wants to play catch? Maybe he just wants to scare us to death? Tang Zhenliu said.
No.
From Black Steel Wolf to Bone Witch, the truth is, the creatures that have died aren't very important. If I was the enemy, I'd go after someone like Cheap Sheep or Green Cow, Jing Jiwu said. Why us? Why not kill you first? Cheap Sheep and Green Cow fired back angrily at Jing Jiwu. That is because you are Han Sen's right and left hands. You two are integral. If they wanted Han Sen to die of fright, they'd at least go for you two first, Jing Jiwu said. When Cheap Sheep and Green Cow heard this, they patted their chests. Right. They don't kill important people like us. That must mean the enemy's power is limited. A few people around the table smiled. Even though Cheap Sheep and Green Cow were very important members of the shelter, they were probably the easiest to kill. That was what Jing Jiwu was saying. If they weren't dead yet, it meant the enemy did have a limit and could not kill any they desired to. We need to find out how this enemy is killing our people. We also need to learn what this limit is. Lin Feng thought for a minute, then said, There are no leads for us to follow now, so we'll have to wait and keep our eyes out for something. What if someone else dies and we still can't learn anything new? Cheap Sheep felt quite worried. If many people die, we may not be able to see how they are killed, but more info can lead to better predictions, Lin Feng said. What kind of method is that? Cheap Sheep exclaimed. Do you have any better ideas? Jing Jiwu looked at Cheap Sheep. The sheep stopped talking. Even Han Sen and Gu Qingqing hadn't been able to find out how Bone Witch had died. Lin Feng and the others did not want to go to the Alliance. Han Sen spoke to them about changing the patrols slightly. One night, when there was no killing, Han Sen brought Bauer with him on patrol. When he saw Cheap Sheep and Green Cow, he almost jumped out of his skin. Cheap Sheep and Green Cow were covered in yellow paper. The pieces of paper were charms with words scribbled upon them. The charms were planted on their heads, bums, and every bodily crevice. Green Cow even had one that looked like a skirt. It was very obvious. Where did you get these from? Han Sen asked with surprise. Boss, we asked Wang Yuhang to buy them for us. Apparently, it cost quite a bit. He said they had been blessed by a god. They can keep us safe and prevent evil from ever touching us. We have lucky charms, too. If you wear them, your fortune increases. Even if we end up in a battle, I am sure we will be the last to fall. I bought this for you, boss. You should wear it. Cheap Sheep and Green Cow spoke with mystic tones in their voices. Cheap Sheep moved forward to present the charm to Han Sen. Han Sen did not know what to say, though. Wang Yuhang had obviously scammed a lot of money out of Cheap Sheep and Green Cow. Thanks a lot. Han Sen took the bag that they offered. You are our boss. We don't want anything bad happening to you, Cheap Sheep said. We will live until the very end, Green Cow said. We will all live, Han Sen said, and placed the charm in a bag. Then, Cheap Sheep said, Boss, you need to hang it on your chest. Let me do it for you. And I also got this charm for Bauer. As Cheap Sheep spoke, Han Sen looked increasingly glum. He looked beyond the walls of the shelter and heard a bell ring. In the distance, Han Sen could see a pure white donkey walking towards Shadow Shelter. The donkey was the size of any average donkey, but not a single speck of dirt muddied its pure white fur. A bronze bell was hanging around its neck, and whenever the creature moved, it gently tolled. On the donkey's back, a human-looking person was riding it. It was difficult to discern his race from that distance, but he seemed to be clad in green clothing. The man was sitting with his legs crossed. He had one hand in front of his chest, with another clutching a necklace. He rubbed it a lot. If you looked closely at the orbs of the necklace, you could see they weren't what they initially seemed. They were very small skulls. Strangely small, but the skulls were rounded and polished like smooth stones, most likely a result of long years of rubbing. It was like they were painted, but in the eye of every skeleton, you could still catch sight of a queer red light. Looking at the light in their sockets would make any observer feel nervous. It would almost feel as if the eye socket was ready to suck you inside. As the man fondled the skulls, he chanted something with his eyes firmly closed. He looked very calm, as if he was simply sunbathing. The donkey was approaching Shadow Shelter now. The creature's big eyes were fixed on Han Sen, who stood atop the tower. The donkey looked like a proud animal, and it looked at Han Sen from the corner of its eyes. It was like the creature was saying that, aside from the man on his back, he was the greatest there. F***CK. Someone is waltzing up to the gate. I'm going to take people to kill them, Cheap Sheep shouted, looking at the man and the donkey. I won't stop you if you want to die. But don't take others down with you, Gu Qingqing said coldly. She didn't look at the sheep when she spoke. Her eyes were attached to the man on top of the donkey. Cheap Sheep was suddenly shocked, and he realized that the man below might be someone that he really shouldn't offend. Han Sen looked at the man on the white donkey, and he could tell it was the man Gu Qingqing had mentioned before. It was Ancient Devil. Although Han Sen had never seen Ancient Devil himself, the Emperor had left a replica of himself in his old shelter in the Third God's Sanctuary. That shadow looked exactly the same as Ancient Devil did. The only difference was the feeling of him. The shadow looked very holy, but Ancient Devil himself looked like an average guy. Aside from the skull necklace he clutched, he looked like a standard religious person. If Han Sen hadn't known that the being in the Third God's Sanctuary was only Ancient Devil's shadow, everyone would believe it was the real Ancient Devil. Seeing that the donkey was now only 200 meters away from the gate, Gu Qingqing's eyes looked icy as she drew out her sword. She sent out a sword light that looked powerful enough to sunder the entire earth. The donkey acted as if it didn't see the attack coming. It maintained the same speed as it trotted toward the gate. When the sword light was just about to reach Ancient Devil's head, he lifted the hand that was on his chest. With only his thumb, he reached out defiantly and touched Gu Qingqing's sword light. When the skin of the thumb came into contact with the sword light, it made the attack blend into his other 4 fingers like water. In that moment, the sword light was absorbed. Ancient Devil then opened his hand, revealing the residue that was left. Ancient Devil opened his eyes and blew at the remains on his hand. The dust scattered with the wind and disappeared from sight. The donkey came to a halt then. Ancient Devil looked up at Han Sen, who was atop the tower, and smiled. I am from Nampure Mountain. I am Ancient Devil. Are you Skysword Han Sen? I am. What are you doing here, Ancient Devil Emperor? Does every elite want a shot at my life? Han Sen said, looking at Ancient Devil. Han Sen would not underestimate this character, though. A man who had planned to kill God needed some respect, even if his attempt had not succeeded. His subordinates had been scary people, too. Sky King, Yaksha, Xiang Yin, Dragon King, and Azura. None of them were weak. As the master of those elites, he might have been betrayed by Azura, but he survived and thrived. He became a demigod after that. He was a legend of sorts. Ancient Devil smiled and said, I am not an enemy of yours. A friend has asked me for a favor, and it concerns you. Whether I can help depends on your friend and what you'll be asking of me, Han Sen said coldly. But he already knew the answer. The leader of Sacred is a good friend of mine. His young daughter goddess was ignorant and naive. She offended you. I was hoping if you'd be kind enough to let her go. If you do this, I would appreciate it. Ancient Devil bowed towards him. And what if I don't? Han Sen asked him. Ancient Devil, with his head still lowered, sighed and said, You can save 3,456 lives. It'd be a good deed. If you're a smart person, you'll know what to do. Hearing Ancient Devil say this, Han Sen looked murderous. The shelter's population was 3,456. No more, no less. Did you kill Steel Wolf and Bone Witch? Han Sen asked, his voice hard. To give you a favor, I had to sacrifice those lives. Ancient Devil looked remorseful. You killed my people and say you are doing me a favor? Han Sen laughed at him. Ancient Devil responded, If I hadn't killed them, how would you know that I can kill 3,456 lives? Now you know I could have killed everyone, but I have done you 3,456 favors. All these favors in exchange for goddess life seems fair. Everyone in the shelter was very angry, and Han Sen just laughed. Good math, but you forgot to carry the one. What am I missing? Ancient Devil looked confused. You didn't count your own life? Han Sen teleported in front of Ancient Devil with his split blade aimed at the man's head. The attack did not look like Gu Qingqing's swordlight, which was obviously ridiculously powerful. But that was the good thing about Han Sen's attack. It looked simple, but it left Ancient Devil with no option other than receiving the strike. Han Sen still didn't know how Ancient Devil had killed Bone Witch. Killing him would prevent him from harming any more of the inhabitants of Han Sen's shelter. The white donkey Ancient Devil was riding, however, moved and dodged the attack. It made Han Sen freeze. Han Sen was great at prediction and judgment, and that strike had been set up a string of events that would lead to one singular outcome. It made sure Ancient Devil would have to get hit. But now the white donkey had broken this. It had subverted his predictions. This was not something Han Sen expected would happen. Han Sen knew it was hard to predict stuff, and he knew not to be arrogant enough to claim that he could predict everything. He would, of course, get things wrong occasionally. Han Sen attacked Ancient Devil without reprieve. Every strike used Han Sen's prediction and judgment to the max. Every strike was delivered to Ancient Devil with a rhythm. But Ancient Devil sat perfectly still. It was the donkey that kept moving its legs to avoid Han Sen's strikes. The donkey moved like it was performing ballet. It kept on dodging Han Sen's attacks. Han Sen looked glum, and this actually surprised Queen. Queen thought Han Sen used Heavenly Go very well. It was perfect, as far as she could see, but the donkey somehow always managed to dodge him. It always found somewhere Han Sen hadn't calculated and avoided a strike by the split blade. This donkey is nothing simple. Does it have power like the Dongshin Sutra that allows it to predict things? Han Sen thought to himself as he continued to swing his blade. Somewhere far away, up in the mountains, the leader of Sacred watched the fight alongside a number of elders. Ancient Devil is strong. It is no wonder he crushed 6 paths before. Even just his pet is able to do that. An elder complimented the spectacle. Sacred's leader laughed and said, Don't underestimate that beast. It is a born berserk super creature. It was born with an invincible ability. Sky Sword won't hit it. Not even Dollar could, if he was here. If it is so strong, how come we have never heard about it before? The elder looked at the white donkey in shock. It followed Ancient Devil immediately after its birth, and it has never really shown its powers to others. I only saw its powers in God's ruin, when I explored it alongside Ancient Devil, Sacred's leader said. That means Ancient Devil cannot lose. Let's see how he might strike back. Elder In looked at Ancient Devil, and went on to say, Ancient Devil is a special person. He was able to circumvent the power of Ancient Sky Mirror and gain the loyalty of this mount. We just don't know if he can defeat Sky Sword. We don't know if he can win. Why is he not striking? Ghost Eagle Emperor frowned. He is watching and evaluating Skysword's power. When he does choose to strike, he'll kill his enemy. It looks like he is almost done watching, though. He will strike soon, Sacred's leader said. Weird. Why doesn't he fight back? Cheap Sheep asked. The white donkey kept on dodging, and even Cheap Sheep noticed what was going on. It's not that he doesn't want to strike, it's just that he can't. Queen looked across the arena. He can dodge Han Sen's attack, but Han Sen's own formation is not exposed. He can't find a chance to fight back himself. All he can do is wait. Queen was familiar with Han Sen's skills, so she was able to speak for him. Does that mean we can't find out who is winning? Cheap Sheep sounded quite happy. He originally thought that Han Sen was having trouble just fighting Ancient Devil's pet, which would indicate that Han Sen was likely to lose. No, Han Sen is still at a disadvantage, Gu Qingqing said suddenly. Queen and the others turned to look at Gu Qingqing. Queen understood some of Han Sen's abilities, but she was not superclass. There was something she was missing. Gu Qingqing looked grim, and she said, Han Sen hasn't exposed anything, which is why Ancient Devil hasn't attacked. That means he is at a disadvantage. Sister Chung, could you explain that with a little more clarity? Wang Yuheng couldn't help but ask. Gu Qingqing looked over to their fight and said, Han Sen's attacks aren't allowing an opening because he keeps striking. The attacks are too continuous to allow a response. Queen understood and said, that means Han Sen is forced to attack, and if he stops, he'll be attacked by Ancient Devil. Gu Qingqing nodded and said, Ancient Devil is like a viper in a cave. If Han Sen's attacks develop a flaw, things could get ugly. That's easy. He can just keep on attacking until he kills the enemy, Cheap Sheep said. It's not that easy, and Han Sen can't touch Ancient Devil. And the beast has a strange power. It won't be weaker than any elite, Gu Qingqing said. While they were talking, Han Sen's body stopped for a moment. At that moment, Ancient Devil attacked. The hand he held against his chest was pressing forward towards Han's senator. It felt as if the entire world rested in that palm. One flower, one world. One leaf, one Bodhi. Ancient Devil's hand was like a hand that was picking up flowers. It felt like the entire world was in his palms. Han Sen's eyes looked clear, though. He wasn't afraid of this move, and in fact, he had been waiting for it. As Han Sen was waiting to strike, he felt a movement inside his sea of soul. Han Sen's mind was like steel. He focused and did not allow the sea of soul's discord to affect him. He punched towards Ancient Devil's hand. This was an opening for Ancient Devil, but Han Sen also thought that it was an opportunity. His Dongxian aura was not maxed out yet, and because of that, he was unable to place one finger on the donkey. It was best to end these proceedings than continue with a stalemate. Fists and hands swung through the air, but there were no collisions to be seen. Han Sen felt as if he was powerless, like he had been sucked into an infinite hole. His power was being drawn, but nothing else happened. This drain sapped his power and nothing else. Han Sen used some of his power and realized he could not escape Ancient Devil's hand. His power kept on getting sucked into Ancient Devil's body. The rumbling inside Han Sen's Sea of Soul was getting stronger, as well. Eventually, he noticed that the activity was coming from Destiny's Tower. But it wasn't the tower itself making the fuss. It was the armored man that had been trapped inside it. He was casting ice and fire spells, thrashing around his prison inside Destiny's Tower. He couldn't break the trappings, but it made the tower shiver and shake, all the same. Han Sen was surprised. When Armored Man was first captured, he tried to break out to no avail. And in that process, he had ended up hurting himself. But ever since then, there had been no further activity from him. If he was causing a commotion at this moment, perhaps he knew Han Sen was in the midst of a fight, and that there'd be no chance of containing him if he managed to break free. But Han Sen did not think this was the case either. Armored Man was trapped inside Destiny's Tower. He could not see what was outside that prison, so there shouldn't have been a way for him to know Han Sen was in the middle of a fight. Han Sen did not have to think right now, though. His power was like a river, all going into Ancient Devil's hands. If this were to continue, he'd eventually dry up his reserve. Han Sen summoned Bulwark Umbrella and used it to take stabs at Ancient Devil's hands. Ancient Devil tried to grab the umbrella, and just like earlier, he wished to take it. The bulwark umbrella then opened up. Ancient Devil's hand made contact with it, and yet, there was no shockwave. None of the Geno Core's power was absorbed. A light appeared, separating Han Sen from Ancient Devil. Ancient Devil's hand was unable to absorb Han Sen's power now, which meant his hands were free. Ancient Devil looked at Han Sen's bulwark umbrella in immense shock. Then he changed his momentum, and when he did, a burst of air came out from him. His hands were collapsing onto Han Sen next. Han Sen frowned, and he saw a red light appeared around Ancient Devil. It was the power of Han Sen's God Geno Core. Now Han Sen knew Ancient Devil could absorb the power of his enemies and even make use of it. It wasn't just that either. Ancient Devil's own power was stronger than what Han Sen was losing. When he absorbed the powers of his enemies, he could put his own power into the element of what the enemy had been using. It was practically cheating. Now Han Sen knew why Gu Qingsheng had said Ancient Devil could make use of any element. It was too easy for him to make use of other elements. Pang! Ancient Devil threw his palm forward at the umbrella. The umbrella curved like a broken drum. But after that, the surface bounced back into a correct position. It hadn't been broken. Ancient Devil continued to slap the umbrella as a red light doused the entire area. The umbrella was repeatedly curved, expelling thunderous noises. But no matter how strong Ancient Devil's powers were, he could not break a gemstone-class umbrella. The situation had been changed. Han Sen had initially been attacking, but now Ancient Devil was on the offensive. Han Sen used Bulwark Umbrella to block each and every attack. The umbrella is strong. Where did it come from? Ghost Eagle Emperor looked at the Bulwark Umbrella in shock. Ancient Devil's palm was strong, and every strike was like a red sky falling. Each blow deformed Han Sen's defenses, but the umbrella still bounced back every time. Sky Sword has good sword skills and a good Geno Core, Eldarine grumbled. He actually looked greedy when he looked at the Bulwark Umbrella. Ancient Devil was suppressing Han Sen like a demon. Every palm was a shocking spectacle, but none of them could harm Han Senator. Everyone knew it was because of the umbrella. It was such a powerful defense Geno Core, and many elites thought it was keeping him alive. I wonder what Skysword's self-Geno Core is. Sacred's leader frowned as he watched the umbrella. Han Sen had used a few different Geno Cores, and each one was powerful. They couldn't tell which one had actually come from Han Sen. No one thought it was actually the Bulwark Umbrella. It was famous, but it was only gemstone class. They didn't think something like that could break Ancient Devil's powers. Sacred's leader thought Bulwark Umbrella was a super Geno Core. Han Sen did not expect the umbrella to be so strong. Either, Ancient Devil had taken Han Sen's God Geno Core power, and so his strikes were stronger than anything that Six Paths could deliver. And yet, a gemstone-class Bulwark Umbrella was able to block it. Han Sen was shocked to see that it had not been damaged. It is no wonder it is Dongxian Sutra's Geno Core. It is so strong. Han Sen complimented his own blade. Han Sen used the defense of the umbrella to wait for the right time to fight back. So far, Ancient Devil hadn't used his Geno Cores. It had been a while since Han Sen went up against a strong enemy such as that, though. If he was unable to win, he'd use Super King Spirit and summon Destiny's Tower to suppress Ancient Devil. Speaking of that, Han Sen turned his attention to the armored man who was in the tower. He was still shouting. The ice and fire powers were gunning like active volcanoes. His body kept slamming against the barriers, but he could only shake the tower. That was bad, as his body kept getting cut by the vortex whenever he slammed into it. The hard armor was unable to withstand the powers of space. He kept on getting cut even now. His blood was flowing like streams of white lava, seeping through the gaps of the armor, even. It went everywhere. Armored Man would not stop, though. It was like he had completely lost his mind. What is wrong with that guy? Has he been locked up for so long that he wants to die? Han Sen wondered. But seeing Armored Man's face, he didn't look quite crazy. Ancient Devil's palm was getting heavier, and Han Sen couldn't think of a way to repel it. So, he used his Bulwark Umbrella to brace against it. Seeing Ancient Devil's incoming attack, Han Sen thought to himself, Armored Man seems to have gone crazy right after Ancient Devil decided to attack me. Is there a connection between the two? Bulwark Umbrella blocked Ancient Devil's move. Then Han Sen spoke to his Sea of Soul, which was rolling with thunder. Are you related to Ancient Devil? Armored Man, who had thus far refused to talk to Han Sen, was enraged. He exclaimed, if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be like this. Let me out. I want to kill him. After that, Armored Man kept thrashing about. He didn't care for his wounds. He just desperately wanted to get loose, get free, and get out. Then tell me, what is your grudge with Ancient Devil? Han Sen needed to hear more of the story than that. Armored Man was unable to get free. He gritted his teeth. I am a born emperor created by Ancient Devil. I was in the Chimenia, refining for eternity. The tone of voice was one that possessed intense hatred. It was obvious that he wanted to skin his enemy alive. Han Sen was surprised, though. He wasn't a terribly trusting individual, but Gu Qingqing told him Armored Man's powers were the work of a Qigong master. But now, Armored Man was saying that he had been imprisoned inside the Chimenia by Ancient Devil. Both stories were vastly different. Ancient Devil did not look like a human Qigong master, so why would he have an immortal Chimenia? He couldn't use Qigong. Weird. How was Ancient Devil able to imprison you? He didn't kill you. He just made you stronger. And he even let you out. Why would you create trouble for him? Han Sen didn't believe him. Armored Man roared, he didn't let me go. He just didn't know I'd grow that much. He didn't know I'd become strong enough to slay his guardian. Han Sen's heart then jumped, and he asked, is Headless Rockman a guardian belonging to Ancient Devil?
No.
Headless Rockman was damaged by Ancient Devil himself. It is why he was like that, Armored Man answered. That surprised Han Senator. He went on to ask, who was the Headless Rockman, anyway? I don't know, Armored Man replied. Ancient Devil wanted Destiny's Tower. He turned the owner of the tower into the Headless Rockman, but he was still unable to take the tower. I became strong once I was released, and I did my best to defeat Headless Rockman. I didn't want Destiny's Tower to be lost, either. Somehow, you managed to come into its possession. Han Sen then got to mulling what he had been told and determining whether or not Armored Man was telling the truth. Ancient Devil was an even scarier figure, if so. Ancient Devil had already caused a lot of trouble in the Third God's Sanctuary, and he had killed the Master of Destiny's Tower in the Fourth God's Sanctuary. He also created Armored Man. Trying to comprehend what his true goals might have been was a baffling endeavor. While Han Sen thought this over, Armored Man was still as desperate as ever. He kept roaring and thrashing around. He said, let me out. I'm going to kill him. Calm down. Ancient Devil is strong, and you are still injured. If I let you out, you won't be able to defeat him. Wait until I find the right opportunity. Once I have, I'll free you. Han Sen did not let him out. Han Sen did not trust Armored Man, and he had used Dollar's identity when capturing him. If he let him out, it would expose Han Sen as Dollar to everyone. But Armored Man would not give up. He kept on thrashing about. It didn't concern Han Sen much, though, as there was no chance of him getting free despite the effort. Ancient Devil could not finish off Han Sen, so he ultimately decided to leave. It looks like we have come to a draw today, so there is no point in us fighting. I implore you to consider handing Goddess back over. If you need me, just shout to me outside the gates. After that, Ancient Devil rode the white donkey away. Han Sen could not stop the white donkey, so he just let them go. There'd be no point giving chase. Seeing Ancient Devil leave, Han Sen felt strange. Ancient Devil hadn't used all his strength, and yet he was already leaving. That was surprising. After Ancient Devil left, he went to meet up with Sacred's leader and a few others. Leader, I am sorry. I was unable to kill Sky Sword and rescue Goddess. Ancient Devil sighed. I am grateful you were willing to help, and it's okay if you were unable to kill him. With your Ancient Devil power, you can just kill one creature every day. It won't take long, Sacred's leader said. Unless he kills Sky Sword, selecting targets will be difficult. But if he kills Sky Sword immediately, the ancient Sky Mirror would be useless and he wouldn't have this much trouble, Ghost Eagle Emperor said. Eldarine said, it was Illusion Elder's mistake. He did not kill Death Goddess, and he allowed Sky Sword to take the ancient Sky Mirror. If he hadn't, we would have already wiped out Sky Sword. Don't worry. We will soon seize the shelter and kill Sky Sword, Sacred's leader said. It will be difficult. We cannot kill Sky Sword, and we cannot use the ancient Sky Mirror. Ancient Devil killing one creature a day would still take forever because they have so many there, Eldarine coldly said. Ancient Devil looked very upset, and he said, to be honest, my Ancient Devil power can only take down the weaker creatures. People like Sky Sword? I can't do much from a distance. Hearing Ancient Devil say this, they felt relieved. If Ancient Devil said his power could kill anyone from any distance, they would be very afraid. Kill as many as you can, anyway. We'll find another way soon, Sacred's leader said. But it won't be difficult to kill Sky Sword. My power is just not enough to break through that umbrella-looking Geno core. If everyone helped, we could break it easily, Ancient Devil said. Ancient Devil Emperor, he has the ancient Sky Mirror. Even if we broke the umbrella and killed him, he could just respawn, Ghost Eagle Emperor said. My Ancient Devil power can't just kill someone like that, but I can still circumvent the mirror if I kill him myself. I can kill him, Ancient Devil said coldly. We can try it. If we cooperate, we will destroy the umbrella easily, Ghost Eagle Emperor said. After Han Sen returned to the shelter, he asked the Armored Man more about what happened. Armored Man was very angry, and he had no way of releasing his rage. He started ranting, and Han Sen understood what had happened. Armored Man was a born emperor that was actually called Inferno Skeleton Emperor. Ancient Devil destroyed his shelter and claimed his spirit stone. He had no choice but to obey. But after submitting to the service of Ancient Devil, he was placed inside a chimenea. While imprisoned, he was burned with ice and fire for a very long time. Inferno Skeleton Emperor could not die inside the chimenea, but he had to endure incredible agony the entire time. Some urgent matter pulled Ancient Devil away, and he left. For a long time, it was only the Guardian that was left there, so there was nothing Inferno Skeleton Emperor could do to escape. But despite all that, he still earned something after the ordeal. During the time he spent in the chimenea, the Emperor's body was reinforced. He also learned to command the powers of ice and fire, as well. When he gained control of the chimenea, he absorbed much more ice and fire. That was how he had made himself an overwhelming contender in Divinity's bout. But before he could gain his revenge and go up against Ancient Devil, Han Sen claimed him and trapped him inside Destiny's Tower. Armored Man didn't know much about Headless Rockman and Destiny's Tower, but he knew that the feud between Headless Rockman and Ancient had been going on since before he was forced to serve Ancient Devil. One thing Han Sen learned, however, was that Ancient Devil was apparently afraid of Destiny's Tower and Headless Rockman, and Ancient Devil was unable to defeat Headless Rockman, who controlled it. When Inferno Skeleton Emperor was made free, so was Destiny's Tower. Inferno Skeleton Emperor knew that Ancient Devil was scared of Destiny's Tower, so he wanted to take that tower with him in his pursuit of revenge. After trying many times, he finally managed to defeat Headless Rockman, but unfortunately, he did not receive the tower he had been so desperate for. Han Sen was the one who got it. Let me out, Inferno Skeleton Emperor was raging. He hated Ancient Devil more than he hated Han Sen. Han Sen kept him within Destiny's Tower because his struggles had weakened him. Han Sen ignored his repeated plight, but after a while, he said, although you are strong, you cannot beat Ancient Devil. But Ancient Devil, you said, could not kill Headless Rockman. Yet you managed to kill Headless Rockman. Perhaps he put you in the chimenea to strengthen you, so that he could use you to defeat the one opponent that he feared. Then, he could have Destiny's Tower. Inferno Skeleton Emperor froze. His eyes flared with an icy fire, and he said, regardless of what his purpose was, I have to get my revenge. I have to kill him. You can have your revenge, but he's not here right now. There is no point of you conning out. And even if you did find him, there is no way you could catch up with the beast he rides. Even I was unable to chase him, and you're not very efficient. Or at least I don't think you are, Han Sen said. After he heard that, Inferno Skeleton Emperor went silent. Then he got back to roaring. Wait a bit. If the opportunity arises, I'll let you get the revenge you seek. Han Sen provided him a little comfort. There really was a chance he could be a useful half-ally further down the road. Inferno Skeleton Emperor's physical power was most certainly as good as Ancient Devil's. His strength must have become quite impressive over the years. Unfortunately, His skills were too simple. If he did go up against a mysterious elite like Ancient Devil, things would turn awry. Not long after, Cheap Sheep appeared. He had come with a report, and he looked glum carrying it. He said a creature had just died inside the shelter. And now, all the creatures there were scared. No one knew who might be next. Some creatures had even sneaked away from the shelter to escape, but their attempts hadn't worked out. Elites were outside the shelter, so none of the escaping creatures made it very far. Han Sen called a meeting in the spirit hall to discuss how they should proceed. Ancient Devil is scary, and we're in a bad situation, Gu Qingqing said. There is a limit to his power. He can kill one of us every day, but he won't be able to select the target at will. Even so, that is bad. If he kills one of us a day, it won't take long for everyone to die. Cheap Sheep sounded scared, and he was one of the weakest there. He could be brought down with ease. If you are afraid, go and obey Ancient Devil, Han Sen told the sheep. Cheap Sheep jumped up and said, "What is that supposed to mean? I am your sheep, and I always will be, dead or alive." Cheap Sheep wasn't that loyal, though. There were so many people outside the shelter. He was just worried that if he did try to switch bosses, he'd be killed before he could explain himself. And right now, he thought Han Sen was just testing his loyalty. Han Sen actually wanted Cheap Sheep could go and serve Ancient Devil as a boss. Perhaps there was a chance Ancient Devil could die before striking again. But he knew there were too many elites out there, and Cheap Sheep was too weak to do much of anything. He'd probably be eaten before opening his mouth to speak. He wouldn't even catch a glimpse of Ancient Devil's face. It's a shame Ancient Sky Mirror's power is limited. Otherwise, I would go and fight them, and kill as many of them as I can, Tang Zhenliu said. While they were talking, Green Cow barged into the meeting and said, "Boss, the enemy is coming. They are almost before our shelter." Han Sen was surprised by this. He looked at Gu Qingqing, Lin Feng, and the others. If they were striking now, that meant they had found a way to ignore the ancient sky mirror. If things go wrong, you guys all return to the Alliance. I'll find a way to make it out of here, Han Sen said to Lin Feng. Then, he ran out of the spirit hall. The sky above the shelter was clouded by countless flying beasts, and creatures swarmed across the ground like the tumultuous waves of the sea. There were so many scary life forces to be seen amidst them, and in the front, there was Ancient Devil and Sacred's leader. And there were many more spirits and creatures Han Sen did not know. But even without knowing, Han Sen could tell they were things to fear. Buzz. Han Minger, who was next to Han Sen, fired her death bone. An arrow was loosed, and it slew a creature that was quickly approaching. She strung her bow again as a beast from Ancient Devil's side leaped forward with a roar. Its body was running to meet with the arrow. That monster looked like a bull, but it was covered with green armor. Its horns glistened like golden screws. There was a horn on its nose, too, like that of a rhino. The beast flew towards the arrow and smacked it with its head. The arrow did not hurt the beast, and it was simply knocked away. Han Minger frowned and fired her bow again. Wherever she fired an arrow, it was pulled toward the horn of that frantic beast. Those powerful arrows generated shockwaves when they came against the horn, but no matter how many times it happened, she could not damage the tusk. Horn Beast Alpha is powerful. It is no wonder why he is said to have the strongest horn in the world. Ancient Devil complimented the creature. Other alphas also complimented the performance. They planned to let Horn Beast Alpha deal with Han Minger. Aside from Horn Beast Alpha, no one else was confident in dealing with Han Minger's arrows. Horn Beast Alpha's horn was indestructible, and he had a magnetic ability that could absorb things in his proximity. It allowed him to capture Han Minger's arrows. Han Minger was powerful. Her strongest skill was her empty shot, which enabled her to shoot wherever she wanted to. Unfortunately, all the arrows were being snared by the horn, and there was nothing that could be done about it. I will deal with Gu Qingqing. Elder Yin drew his sword and went towards Gu Qingqing. Gu Qingqing's eyes looked cold, and she drew out pure. Then, she went to Yin Elder. If Gu Qingqing's sword skills were overbearing, then Yin Elder's skills were soft. The delicate nature of his sword and performance nearly made him invisible. He didn't touch Gu Qingqing's attacks and moved around her like water. He was a tough target to face. Gu Qingqing couldn't kill Yin Elder, and so she was trapped. Han Sen frowned. Horned Beast Alpha and Een Elder were stronger than Illusion Elder. They must have been the elders of larger and older tribes. Han Sen heard a long cry come from the shelter, and it boomed and drowned out the sounds of all else. Han Sen saw a red pony standing upon the tallest point of Shadow Shelter. Its small neck arched proudly as it whinnied loudly. Han Sen felt safe. With Red Pony's sonic protection, not even the alphas would be able to get close to the shelter. Even if Ancient Devil had discovered how to break the mirror, he couldn't do it now. But they circumvented Han Sen's expectations. Ancient Devil and the others did not make the shelter their target. Instead, they all went for Han Sen. Han Sen understood what they sought to do. They wanted to kill him first, so they could get the mirror easily. Han Sen was not afraid, and he felt calm. He had been worried the mirror would end up destroyed, and so it was a bit of a relief that their first target wasn't the item. Han Sen summoned his overbearing shield. With his other hand, he summoned the bulwark umbrella. Ancient Devil was hard enough to deal with, but now with all the others coming, he absolutely had to have the umbrella equipped for defense. A Spirit Elder came forward with a spear. The spear turned into a black dragon as it approached. At the same time, Ancient Devil used his palm and Sacred's leader used the cane he held. It released a golden light that was like a holy punishment to Han Sen. A dozen Alpha-class elites surrounded Han Sen, and with so much power coming down from the sky, he had nowhere to run. Lin Feng used the power of the ancient sky mirror to fight the creatures. He killed many creatures in between dying many times. Without the mirror and Little Pony, he would have been permanently dead long ago. Creatures and spirits covered the whole of Shadow Shelter. It looked like a hellscape. There was screaming, and rivers of blood were running everywhere. Boom! There was an explosion in the sky. The shockwave vaporized the creatures and spirits in the vicinity of 100 miles. Nothing was left. In the center of the explosion, Han Sen was holding his umbrella and overbearing shield. His mouth was bleeding, and there were cuts running across his face. His overbearing shield looked to be in a worse state, and it seemed as if it was going to snap in half. Fighting a dozen alphas, even Han Sen's bulwark umbrella and overbearing shield could not keep him protected. He was damaged a bit. Han Sen did not say anything, though. When his body moved, he was headed for the alphas. Others might have been afraid of taking on such numbers, but this was something Han Sen was good at. After he blocked a strike, he ran into a bunch of people, opening and closing his umbrella constantly. Sometimes it was used for defense, other times it was used as a weapon. Combined with his overbearing shield, none of the alphas were able to kill him. Han Sen's desire to fight was high. Blood was everywhere. Shadow Shelter and the encompassing few thousand miles became a bloody hellscape. The mountains were breaking beneath the pressure and power. The blood was like rain as the sky turned red. Bodies were mounting and piling up outside the shelter. Han Sen bet no gold shelter had ever survived a glorious fight like this. Even a super shelter would be horrendously damaged by now. Ancient Devil's target was not the shelter, though, and Red Pony was using its sonic protection. If these had been reversed, Shadow Shelter would have been flattened. It would have been wiped off the map of the Fourth God's Sanctuary and vanished without a trace. Even if Shadow Shelter was destroyed, with the mirror there, they could still be safe. Arg, I'm dead. A creature came running towards Cheap Sheep, and the sheep screamed. He fell to the ground with his neck broken, eyes rolling to the back of his skull, and tongue hanging out. The creature looked surprised. Then, it went forward. But when he ran past Cheap Sheep, another Cheap Sheep appeared. Cheap Sheep summoned his horn scimitar and shoved it up the creature's bum. Arg! The creature suddenly jumped up and screamed.